Welcome, dear friend, to the Sleeping Hourglass. Our journey begins with something deceptively small. A machine. Not the roar of an engine, or the hum of electricity, but a quiet, patient mechanism that changed the rhythm of human life, the clock. If you find comfort here, and wish to keep this space alive, you might consider subscribing. Not out of obligation, but as a way to keep the doors of this quiet corner open for whenever you need it. The morning comes without announcement. It slips in through the pale mist that clings to the fields, touches the dew-beaded grass, and finds its way into the open shutters of a sleeping village. Here, no bell tolls the hour. The rooster's call is as close to a schedule as anyone needs, and even he crows when he pleases. The world still belongs to the sky. The slow unfolding of daylight is the only clock. Not measured in minutes, but in changes of light and shadow. The first glint of the sun on the river tells the fisherman when to cast his nets. The length of a shadow on the barn wall tells the farmer when it's time to rest his back and share a meal. In this age, time is not a possession, it is a companion. It flows alongside the lives of men and women, neither hurried nor held back. The year is a circle, not a straight line. It turns with the sowing and reaping of fields, with the thaw of ice and the return of migrating birds. Every month feels different in the bones. The damp chill of February, the restless winds of April, the heavy, buzzing afternoons of July. Festivals rise like bright constellations scattered through the dark stretches of work. The spring planting feast arrives when the first shoots break the soil, its date decided not by ink on parchment, but by the earth's readiness. Harvest festivals swell with the abundance of autumn. When the air smells of hay and apples, the turning of the moon tells lovers when to meet in secret, hunters when to track deer, healers when to gather their herbs. The moon is the true keeper of months. Its waxing and waning is steady, trustworthy. A shepherd lying on his back in the grass can watch it change night by night, silver growing to fullness and then shrinking into shadow. Generations know its cycle without charts or tables. They count their own years in winters survived, in summers remembered, not in numbers written down. There is no rush here. Work begins when the light is good, ends when it fails. A conversation can stretch as long as the fire burns. Children play until they are called in by the smell of supper, not by a curfew. The river decides when it is safe to cross, not the striking of a clock. It is not a perfect world. Storms come early or late. Crops fail when the season turns against them. Winter sometimes overstays its welcome, pressing hunger into the hearts of families. But even these hardships are part of the same great turning. A reminder that time is not controlled, only experienced. The elders tell stories of years past the way others might tell the time of day. They recall the long winter, when snow buried the village road until April, or the year the river ran dry, when the midsummer heat burned the fields. Such memories are markers in the collective mind, not measured in dates, but in sensations. In the way the air smelled in the songs that were sung to keep courage alive. Travel is rare, but when it comes, it too moves by nature's pace. A messenger on horseback leaves at dawn and arrives when he arrives. Perhaps by the next sunrise. Perhaps by the next moonrise. No one waits with eyes fixed on a specific hour. They wait with patience shaped by centuries. The road itself teaches that time is not something to be shortened, but something to be endured. There is an intimacy between people and the seasons that later generations will forget. The spring thaw loosens more than the soil. It loosens the human spirit after the confinement of winter. Autumn is a season of both plenty and quiet sorrow, a gentle reminder that even abundance must fade. Winter is not simply endured, it is respected, even welcomed for the rest it forces upon the land. Time here is alive. It has moods and colours like weather. It is not a number printed on a page, but the sound of geese overhead, the smell of rain in dust, the cool length of a shadow. It can be generous, giving a long, warm autumn that keeps the harvest safe. It can be cruel, bringing frost before the wheat is ready. And yet, for all its unpredictability, no one tries to master it. There are no devices in these homes to split the day into exact parts. Sundials exist, but they are rare, and even they speak in approximations. Mid-morning, mid-afternoon, nearly sunset. A person may glance at the shadow's angle, but more often they will simply feel the time in their skin, in their stomach, in the rhythm of their labour. The church bell may sound for Mass, but even that is not so much a measure as an invitation. It calls the faithful when the priest decides the time has come, which may be a little earlier on a cold day, a little later on a warm one. This is the last age in which time belongs wholly to the world, not to human hands. Soon the balance will change. Soon, monks in distant cloisters will begin to divide the day into hours as rigid as the stone walls around them. They will pull time from the sky and fix it to a mechanism of iron and wood. The bell will ring at the same moment every day, regardless of season, regardless of light. The change will be quiet at first, almost invisible. A few more towns will set up their own bells, their own measures. Merchants will see advantage in knowing exactly when a market opens or a ship is due to sail. Farmers will be told the hour of Mass rather than the sound of the priest's footsteps, and bit by bit, the ancient intimacy between time and nature will fray. But for now, in this fading century, we still walk in the rhythm of the earth. We wake with the sun not because we must, but because it feels right. We sleep when the stars tell us to, not when a number demands it. We trust the turning of the seasons the way we trust the rising of the next day. Somewhere, far from these fields, the first gears are being shaped on the workbench of a patient craftsman. Somewhere, the idea of binding time to a machine is taking root. But here, in this village, the river still rises and falls without concern for seconds. The moon still waxes and wanes, unseen by any mechanical face. The air smells of cut hay and wood smoke. The horizon holds the promise of tomorrow. The past lies just behind us, the future just ahead, and both are measured not in minutes, but in the turning of the earth beneath our feet. Soon, the bell will ring at the same moment every day, not because the sun has moved, but because gears and weights say it must. And in the stillness of cloisters, the monks will make the hours holy and begin the slow binding of time. The day in the monastery does not begin with the sun. It begins with a bell. A single note rolls out over the sleeping countryside, soft at first, then swelling as if it were a ripple travelling through air. It is still dark, the kind of darkness that presses against the skin. But already the monks stir. Bare feet touch cold floors. Woolen robes are drawn close. One by one, they move through the shadowed cloisters, their steps soundless on worn stone. The air smells faintly of candle wax and damp mortar. Somewhere beyond the walls, the village sleeps on. But within these arches, the first hour of the day has arrived. Matins, the first prayer, the voice of the monastery rises together in the darkness, low and steady, like the hum of the earth itself. The monks live by a rhythm that ignores the shifting moods of the seasons. Winter's late dawn and summer's early light mean nothing here. The bells still ring at their appointed times. This is the essence of the monastic life, a discipline that shapes the day into a fixed sequence. No matter how the sun or clouds might wander, the tradition is ancient. Long before the mechanical clock, monastic orders had divided the day into what they called the canonical hours. Matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, and compline. 8 moments of prayer that together encircle every waking hour. Between them lie the labours of the hands, tending gardens, copying manuscripts, brewing ale, caring for the sick. But all these tasks bend themselves around the sacred rhythm. In early centuries, before precision was possible, the timing of these hours was kept by the human senses. A monk trained his eyes to the changing colours of the sky, his ears to the subtle chorus of dawn birds or evening insects. In larger monasteries, water clocks or sundials helped give structure, but even these bowed to nature's pace. Clouded skies could hide a dial's shadow, frozen nights could slow the drip of water. But in the medieval period, something begins to change. Somewhere in the workshops attached to these abbeys, places where carpenters shaped wood for choir stalls, where blacksmiths forged tools for farming, another kind of work begins. Here, in the dim light of tallow lamps, men with careful hands start fitting together gears and rods driven by weights and regulated by escapements. The first mechanical clocks. Their purpose is not to open markets or guide travellers. Their purpose is to serve prayer. Imagine the first time a monk hears it. The steady beat of an escapement wheel, clicking away in its wooden frame, each movement identical to the last. No cloud can hide it. No winter night can slow it. Here is a time that does not waver, that does not yield to weather or season. Installed in the bell tower, it transforms the monastery. Now the bells ring with an exactness unknown before. Matins at the same moment each day, prime at the same, vespers never late, never early. The day becomes not only ordered, but measured. The monks, who once kept time with the sky now keep time with a machine. And yet, for them, the hours remain holy. Each ring of the bell is a reminder that life is to be shaped by devotion. The mechanical clock is not a tyrant here, it is a servant to the sacred. It ensures that no hour of prayer is missed, that the rhythm of the soul is not disturbed by human forgetfulness. The life inside these walls is austere, but not without beauty. The bell calls them to the chapel, where candles flicker against the gold leaf of illuminated manuscripts. Chants rise and fall, unhurried, unconcerned with the passing of minutes. The air is cool and still, filled with the quiet weight of centuries. The monks do not ask the time. They hear it. They live inside it. Beyond the monastery gates, however, this mechanical heartbeat begins to attract attention. Visitors from nearby towns notice the regularity of the bells. A merchant, hearing them from the road, realizes he can set his travel plans by their sound. A farmer, timing his trip to the market, notes how the bell rings precisely when the sun touches a certain point on the horizon. Word spreads. Here is a place where time is exact, where the hours do not slip. And so, slowly, the monastery's discipline begins to seep outward. Other churches begin to build their own clocks, wanting to match the precision of the abbey. Town halls follow, mounting their clocks high in towers so all can see. In time, the bell's call to prayer will merge with the call to work, to trade, to meet. What began as devotion will become habit, and habit will become necessity. But in these early days, the change is gentle, almost invisible. For the monks, nothing has altered in their purpose. Whether the bell is rung by a brother with an eye on the sky, or by a gear turning against a weight, the hour is still an offering to God. They see no contradiction in this new device. The clock is simply another tool for discipline, another way to honor the sacred order of the day. Still, there is something profound in what is happening here. For the first time in human history, a machine keeps time better than the sun and moon in the eyes of those who live by it. And because it can, life within these walls no longer drifts with the softness of nature's cues. It beats to an even pulse. Perhaps the monks sense what this means. Perhaps as they file through the cloisters between lauds and prime, they wonder whether this unyielding regularity will one day be applied to more than prayer. But for now, they walk beneath the echo of the bells, their hands folded, their voices low, the world outside still far away. Through winter snow and summer heat, through the slow decay of autumn leaves, and the green surge of spring, the bells keep ringing. They shape the days into a circle of devotion, a perfect wheel turning without haste or pause. And in their quiet way, the monks have done something no ruler or merchant has yet achieved. They have made hours not only visible, but binding. In the centuries to come, the discipline of the monastery will leave these stone walls and take root in every corner of the human world. Factories, schools, trains, armies, all will one day live by the same steady measure first perfected here. But in this moment, the clock's tick belongs to prayer alone. The monks return to their cells. Candles are snuffed out. The cloister falls silent, except for the faint sound of the mechanism above. Still turning, still counting. In the tower, the weight slowly descends, driving the gears toward the next hour. The next bell, the next gathering in the chapel. Outside, the night deepens. The stars keep their ancient pace, unconcerned with human hours. But in the monastery, the bell waits for its moment, and when it comes, it will speak not to the sky, but to the soul. Beyond the abbey walls, towns and markets begin to listen for the bell's voice. And soon, the first great public clocks will rise, carrying the monks' discipline into the streets. The sound comes first, not the soft toll of a monastery bell, but a bold strike that echoes down cobbled streets, across market stalls, through the open windows of sleeping houses. The first public clocks announce themselves, not with subtlety, but with certainty. A voice that can be heard over the creak of cart wheels and the call of vendors. People pause when they hear it. Some count the strokes on their fingers, others simply note the moment and carry on. In the quiet, after the ringing fades, the marketplace exhales and life resumes. But something has shifted. The hour has been declared, and all who heard it now live in its wake. These first great clocks are marvels of craft. Inside their wooden frames and stone towers, iron teeth bite into wooden cogs, and each movement is a negotiation between weight and gravity. A rope unwinds slowly from a drum, the suspended weight pulling against gears that turn with patient inevitability. At the heart of it all, the escapement, a device as delicate as it is revolutionary, regulates the flow of power, releasing it in measured bursts. Click, pause. Click, pause. Each sound a heartbeat in the life of the town. Before the clock, the hours belonged to the sun, and no two towns shared the same noon. Shadows fell differently in each place, and the rhythm of one community might lag or leap ahead of another by minutes or more. But now, here in the square, a single measure is visible and audible to all. And these early clocks are not hidden away. They are placed where everyone can see them, high on the walls of churches, mounted above the arched gates of city halls, fixed into the towers that watch over the markets. Their faces are painted with bright numbers, their hands long enough to read from across the square. They do not whisper time, they declare it. In a sense, they are a kind of theatre. Children stand below, craning their necks to watch the turning of the hands. Merchants plan the opening of stalls by the hour hand's position. Even those who cannot read letters can now read time. The clock speaks in a universal language, a circle, two hands, and the bell's call. The building of these machines is itself a new craft. Blacksmiths forge the teeth of gears with precision unheard of outside weapon making. Carpenters shape the great wheels from seasoned oak, ensuring they will not warp with damp or cold. Clockmakers, a profession barely imagined a generation ago, become respected figures, their skill part artistry, part engineering, part patience. Yet these clocks are imperfect. They lose minutes, sometimes hours, over the course of a week. A change in temperature can make the gears run fast. Dust in the mechanism can slow them down. And so, once or twice a week, a man climbs into the tower to reset the time, often using the sun as his guide. Even here, in the heart of mechanical time, nature still holds a quiet authority. But each time the bell rings, the habit of listening deepens. The market begins to notice when a certain stall opens a little earlier or later than the rest. The town council calls meetings at the third hour after sunrise. But now that phrase has a sharper edge. Everyone can hear exactly when that moment comes. Even the rhythm of work begins to shift. Artisans find they can measure their labor not only in tasks completed, but in the number of times the bell has marked the passing hour. There is a subtle change in the way people think about time. Once, it was elastic. The morning might feel long or short, depending on the work at hand. Now, the bell interrupts, dividing the day into neat compartments. Life gains a new precision, but also a new constraint. The clock gives structure, but it also imposes it. In some places, the public clock becomes a symbol of pride. A town's wealth is measured not only in its walls and markets, but in the beauty and reliability of its timepiece. Rivalries arise. Whose clock strikes most accurately? Whose chimes can be heard the farthest? Travellers remember towns, not only for their architecture or trade, but for the distinctive tone of their bells. And still, the clock's reach grows. In ports, ship captains consult the tower clocks before setting sail, aligning their departure with the tide. In cities, watchmen use the chimes to signal changes in their patrol. In rural villages, farmers begin to glance toward the distant spire to see how long until the next call to prayer. What began in the monastery as devotion is now a civic utility. Time is no longer kept only for the sake of the soul, it is kept for the sake of the street, the shop, the ship, the deal. The clock has stepped out from behind cloister walls and taken its place at the center of public life. Yet it is still far from the tyrant it will one day become. Its chimes are a guide, not a command. People hear them, but they are not bound in chains to their rhythm. A farmer may still finish his work when the field is done, not when the clock says the day is over. A merchant may linger in conversation after the bell has marked the end of the market day. The clock is important, but it has not yet taken full possession of life. The craftsmen who build and maintain these machines know they are part of something larger than themselves. Each tooth they shape, each gear they balance, will outlive them. The clock they tend today will still be telling time long after they are gone, its voice unchanged. There is a kind of humility in that knowledge, a recognition that time belongs to more than any single life. And in the evening, when the marketplace empties and the streets grow quiet, the clock still ticks above the square, a lone sentinel in the night. Its hands move steadily across its painted face, unseen by most, but still marking the passage of hours. The bell will ring again in the morning, calling the town to its business, reminding them all that time now has a center, a voice, a face. It is here, in these towers, that time begins its slow transformation into a public authority. And from here, it will travel into the hands of merchants, into the timetables of ships, into the ledgers of trade. The clock, once a servant of devotion, will soon enter the service of profit. In the ports and counting houses, the merchant's gaze will turn toward these new timekeepers, and the hour will become as valuable as gold. The day begins not with the sun, but with the bell. It is the bell that calls the dockhands to their ropes, the sailors to their sails, the merchants to their counting tables. In the half light before dawn, the port is already awake, lanterns swinging gently from posts, casting trembling halos over wet stone. The tide is pulling back, slow and deliberate, as if it too is part of the morning's trade. In earlier centuries, merchants relied on instinct and the changing sky to govern their work. The crow's cry at first light, the smell of the wind, the angle of a ship's shadow on the water. These were the instruments by which deals were timed. But instinct could be fooled. Tides might run later than expected. Winds might shift in betrayal. One missed departure could mean weeks lost and profits gone to another man's hand. The invention of the clock changed this world in small, almost invisible ways at first. A shipwright might use it to mark the hour when his apprentices began their work. A dockmaster might check it before raising the harbour gate. Yet soon, a deeper transformation began to take root. The merchants noticed. The great trade ports of Europe, Venice, Bruges, London, Lisbon, became places where the hours mattered as much as the cargo. In Venice, the Piazza San Marco echoed with the ringing of the clock tower, marking time for the entire city. In London, the chimes from St. Paul's carried over the Thames, telling ship captains when the tide was turning. In Lisbon, astrolabes and marine timepieces began to appear in the hands of navigators, linking the movement of ships to the certainty of a mechanical rhythm. For the merchant, time was no longer the background against which trade unfolded. It became a tool, a weapon even. A deal struck at precisely the right hour could mean the difference between profit and loss. Ships timed to catch a favourable tide could beat competitors to port by days. A warehouse could be cleared, goods loaded, and sails raised all within the window when the sea was most forgiving. And with this came a new hunger for precision, for punctuality, for mastery over fleeting moments. On the quayside, deals began to include not only the date, but the hour of delivery. By the third bell after sunrise, a contract might read, "The goods shall be placed upon the wagon." Buyers learned to trust those who kept their promises to the minute and to avoid those whose word wandered with the sun. The very reputation of a merchant could be bound to his relationship with the clock. It was not only the mechanics of trade that shifted, but its psychology. Time became a form of trust. A merchant who arrived early was a man of discipline. One who arrived late was a man of risk. Punctuality became as much a currency as silver. In the counting houses, clerks began recording the hours alongside the sums. Ships' logs recorded departures down to the minute. And in the cafes where merchants gathered to share news of foreign markets, the conversation turned from tides and winds to schedules and timetables. The harbour itself began to keep time. Bells rang out at intervals to signal the change of watch, the opening and closing of city gates, the moment when customs officers began their inspections. The rhythms of the sea were still there, but now they were overlaid with a human-made rhythm. The tick and tock of a world moving to mechanical certainty. In this, the clock revealed its double nature. To the merchant, it was a gift, a way to tame uncertainty and turn it into profit. But it was also a master, demanding obedience. Ships could no longer wait idly for a captain who lingered over breakfast. Warehouse doors closed at the appointed minute. No matter how close the cart came to the gate. Miss the tide by 5 minutes, and the delay might cost a fortune. The harbour became a place where opportunity and loss were separated not by days, but by moments. And moments, once gone, could not be reclaimed. From the decks of their ships, captains watched the shore clocks. From the piers, merchants watched the deck clocks. Each was a reminder that commerce was no longer measured only in miles and cargo. It was measured in hours and minutes, in the narrow spaces where advantage could be taken. Far away, inland traders began to feel the same pull. Caravans departing from inland cities began keeping tighter schedules, synchronizing their movements to match the arrival of ships. Couriers, too, learned to measure their speed against the expectation of punctual delivery. In the counting houses, the merchant's hour began to ripple outward, touching even those who had never seen the sea. This was the quiet revolution of the clock in commerce. It was not a single moment of change, but a slow weaving of precision into the fabric of trade. By the time a generation had passed, it was unthinkable to do business without a clock at hand. But there was something else, too, something less tangible, harder to measure. The merchant's mind began to shift. He no longer thought of the day as a single sweep from sunrise to sunset, but as a sequence of measured intervals, each an opportunity to be used or wasted. The clock had taught him that profit could hide inside the smallest slice of time. And once that idea had taken hold, it was impossible to let it go. Even leisure changed. The merchant who once lingered on the quay to watch the sunset now checked the hour before ordering a drink. The captain who once delayed departure for an afternoon breeze now calculated the loss in hours and set sail without it. In the name of efficiency, the poetry of unmeasured time began to fade. Yet in the evenings, when the work was done and the tide carried the last ships out to sea, there was still a quiet beauty to be found. Lanterns reflected on the water, the slow creak of rigging echoed across the harbour. And somewhere in the darkness, a clock chimed the passing of another hour. The merchants, hearing it, might pause for a moment, not to regret the passing of time, but to acknowledge that in mastering it, they had also bound themselves to it. It was a trade they had made willingly, perhaps without even realizing it. The freedom of the tide, exchanged for the certainty of the clock. And like any trade, it had its price. In the next turn of history's wheel, that price will deepen. For if merchants bent the hours to serve their ledgers, the empire builders to come will bend them to serve entire nations. And the clock will become not just a tool of profit, but a tool of power. The sea has no patience for the lost. It stretches beyond the limits of sight, its surface glittering in the sun and inked by night, offering no fixed point but the sky. A ship in open water is an island adrift, and the world around it is a shifting, liquid wilderness. Sailors speak of the sea as if it were alive, not only for its moods, but for the way it hides direction in plain sight. Latitude is the kinder companion. With a sextant and a steady hand, a navigator can watch the sun's climb or the angle of the pole star, tracing a parallel line across the globe. This tells them how far north or south they are, a ribbon of certainty in an otherwise mutable world. But longitude, the east and west of things, is far more elusive. It cannot be seen in the stars without knowing the time back home. And time, until now, is something the sea steals. The problem is cruel in its simplicity. To know your longitude, you must know what time it is at your point of departure, and compare it with the local time on the ship. Time read by the sun overhead. Every hour's difference marks 15 degrees of the Earth's turn. Yet the sand glasses and pendulum clocks of the land grow useless the moment the ship leaves the harbour. The constant rocking unsettles their steady rhythm. Humidity swells their wood, salt air corrodes their gears. A voyage of weeks turns their minutes into guesses, and their guesses into errors measured not in moments, but in hundreds of miles, and miles at sea can be mortal. There are stories told in low voices of ships sighted from the cliffs of Cornwall, their sails tattered from storms, their masts crooked, their men too weak to cry out. They had misjudged their place in the world, steering too far east or west, and found themselves upon jagged rocks when they believed safe harbour lay ahead. In 1707, the Sealy naval disaster claimed nearly 2,000 lives in a single night, when 4 ships struck the Isles of Sealy. The tragedy was not born of ignorance of the stars. The navigators knew their latitude well enough, but of not knowing where they lay upon that invisible grid of longitude. The loss was not only human. Empires felt the wound. The 18th century is a century of ships, of sails spread wide for trade, conquest, and discovery. Gold, spices, tea, silks, and men are moved across oceans like the shifting currents themselves. A fleet that cannot find its place in the water is a fleet that bleeds wealth, power, and pride into the sea. The problem of longitude is no longer an inconvenience. It is a matter of empire's survival. So begins the long, desperate search for a solution. Some turn to the heavens. Astronomers chart the moons of Jupiter, hoping that their eclipses can serve as a universal clock in the sky. Others try to measure the moon's exact position against the stars, a method known as the lunar distance technique. The Royal Observatory at Greenwich becomes a temple to this quest. Its instruments trained on the night sky, Yet at sea, the rolling deck makes such observations nearly impossible with the precision required. The answer, it seems, might not lie in the heavens at all, but in a small, stubborn question. Can a clock be made that keeps perfect time while tossed upon the waves? A clock at sea must be as steady as a heartbeat, resisting the pull and sway of the ship, immune to dampness, heat, and cold. It must hold to its rhythm not for a day, but for weeks, even months. Such a machine would let a captain carry the time of his home port with him, measuring the world's turning against the sun overhead. And yet, among the learned men of London, such a thing is declared impossible. Still, the search is not abandoned. The British Parliament, recognising the scale of the need, passes the Longitude Act of 1714. A prize of €20,000, a sum equal to a lifetime's fortune, is offered to anyone who can find a method to determine longitude at sea with an accuracy of half a degree. The reward stirs minds across the kingdom. Mathematicians, astronomers, instrument makers, and dreamers submit schemes, floating beacons, giant telescopes, even mechanical contraptions that count the swings of the ocean itself. Most fail before they leave the drawing board. Those that survive the trial find their theories wrecked upon the swells. But the prize remains, like a beacon in the fog, drawing those who believe the sea's mystery can be measured. Ships continue to sail and to vanish. Every departure is both an act of courage and an act of faith. Captains know that beyond the coast lies the vastness, where a misjudgment invisible to the eye can grow, hour by hour, into disaster. They trust their instincts, their charts, and their prayers. But the longing for certainty endures. There is a strange poetry in this waiting, in the thought that somewhere, someone might be building the very thing that will tether time to a ship's deck. Even as the ocean shrugs off each attempt, human hands return to the workbench, grinding gears, shaving wood, testing springs. In the creak of the hull and the whisper of the sails, there is an almost prophetic sense that the solution, like land after a long voyage, is out there. The sailors of this era leave between two worlds, the old world of instinct and the coming world of precision. The old ways, reading the swell of the sea, the colour of the water, the smell of the air, are not gone, but they are being asked to stand beside a new companion, the measured beat of a clock. A partnership between nature's signs and mechanical certainty could remake the map itself. This chapter of history is a kind of holding of breath. Nations strain forward, their ships reaching farther into the unknown, yet the fear of losing one's place haunts every mast. It is a fear that will drive invention, ambition, and patience. For the clock that can tame the sea is not merely a tool. It is the promise of arrival. The horizon remains unchanged, a perfect arc of possibility. Somewhere beyond it, in a workshop far from the salt spray, a man is beginning to think of gears not as fragile pendulums, but as something steadier, smaller, more resilient. He does not yet know that he will spend decades on this problem, that his name will one day be bound to the sea's great riddle. For now, the problem remains unsolved. The sea keeps its secret, and time slips through the fingers of every mariner who tries to hold it. But the idea has taken root that the ocean can be mapped not only in miles and currents, but in minutes and seconds. It is a thought that will change everything. Beyond the horizon, in the quiet of a Yorkshire workshop, a carpenter's hands begin to shape the first answer to the sea's riddle. The patient revolution of John Harrison. In the small village of Barrow upon Humber, the sea is not a constant presence. It is felt in the smell of the wind on certain days, in the way the gulls circle high above the rooftops. But it is far away, a rumour of salt beyond fields and hedgerows. John Harrison grows up not as a sailor, but as a joiner, shaping wood with a patient hand and a craftsman's eye. Yet even here, the problem of longitude reaches him. The news of the silly disaster, of ships wrecked for want of knowing where they were, travels inland with the slow certainty of grief. It is not the ocean that captures Harrison's imagination, but the idea that it can be measured, that the sea's vast uncertainty can be tamed if only time can be carried faithfully from shore to ship. Harrison's early life is steeped in wood. He learns the grain of oak and the stubbornness of yew. From these, he makes not only furniture, but clocks. Wooden clocks, precise beyond what their humble material suggests, tick in his neighbours' homes and in parish churches. He has already taught himself how to coax accuracy from an art that most men leave to apprenticeships in London's clockmaking guilds. Harrison belongs to no guild, yet his skill is a quiet challenge to tradition. The problem of longitude is, to Harrison, not an abstract scientific riddle, but a problem of mechanics. He sees it as a question of how to make a heart that does not falter when the ship rolls, that does not speed up in heat or slow in cold. Pendulums, so steady on land, sway helplessly at sea. Sunglasses are blind to the slow theft of their own precision. Harrison believes that the answer is possible. Not in the sky, not in the stars, but in the hands of a man who will not give up until the ticking is true. The Longitude Act of 1714 offers the great prize, €20,000 to the one who can solve the problem with accuracy. To many, this sum is a beacon. To others, it is bait for impossible dreams. Harrison is not lured by the gold so much as by the challenge itself. His first attempts are not marine chronometers, as the world will later know them, but great, weighty sea clocks. They are built of wood, oak for strength, lignum by tea for its natural oils, and they look as much like pieces of furniture as instruments of navigation. When his first clock, later known as H1, is ready in 1735, it is not sent to sea without testing. Harrison, meticulous as ever, submits it for trial under the watch of the Board of Longitude. The voyage to Lisbon is the clock's first baptism in salt air and shifting decks. And when the ship returns, the results astonish. The clock has kept time to a precision that could fix longitude within the demanded half degree. But the board, cautious and composed of astronomers who favour celestial methods, does not give the prize. Harrison is encouraged, politely, to improve his design. It is the beginning of a long and uneasy dance between the inventor and the authorities who control the reward. Harrison's patience becomes his defining weapon. He moves from H1 to H2, refining the design, making it more compact, more resilient. The second clock is never tested at sea, as Britain is now at war with Spain and its secrets are guarded. Harrison is undeterred. He turns to H3, abandoning the large balances of his earlier models for a new invention, the bimetallic strip, to counter the expansion and contraction of metal in changing temperatures. Years pass, decades. His hair greys, his hands stiffen, but his mind remains fixed on the tick. It is in his later years that Harrison creates H4, a small, round watch that looks more like something to be carried in a pocket than lashed to a deck. This is not a sea clock in the old sense. It is the marine chronometer that will redefine navigation. Harrison sends his son William to sea with it in 1761 on the voyage to Jamaica. Over 81 days. The watch loses a mere 5 seconds. An accuracy so exact that it can fix a ship's position within a single nautical mile. And still, the board hesitates. They argue that one voyage is not enough, that the performance might be chance, that more trials are needed. Harrison, now in his late 60s, must endure yet more testing, more bureaucratic delay. The prize money comes to him in pieces, not as the promised reward, but as partial grants. Conditional on further proof, it is a slow, grinding resistance, and yet Harrison does not yield. His fight for recognition is almost as long as his work itself. The astronomer's preference for lunar distances, a method of measuring the moon's position against the stars, is entrenched, but the practicalities of the chronometer cannot be denied forever. By 1773, when Harrison is 80, King George III himself intervenes, ordering trials at his private observatory and declaring the clock a triumph. Parliament, under royal pressure, awards Harrison the remainder of the prize money, though without the formal title of winner of the Longitude Prize. Harrison dies 3 years later, not at sea but in London, far from the waters his invention has made safer. His chronometer, born of wood and brass and stubborn patience, will sail farther than any explorer. It will be carried on voyages of trade and science, on ships of war and ships of peace, shrinking the oceans not by changing their size, but by allowing humanity to know exactly where it stands upon them. His work is not the loud revolution of battles or declarations. It is the quiet turning of gears, the invisible confidence it gives to a captain watching the horizon. It is a revolution measured in seconds, yet it redraws the maps of the world. Harrison's chronometer becomes the heartbeat of an empire, and beyond that, a companion to all who venture into the blank spaces between continents. And there is a kind of poetry in the fact that the man who gave the sea its clock was himself. A stranger to the sea, he never commanded a ship, never weathered the Cape, never traced longitude on a chart. Under the sway of a tempest, his ocean was a workbench, his waves the tiny teeth of a gear, his tide the steady swing of a balance. The world remembers him not for a single moment of inspiration, but for the decades of endurance it took to bring his idea to life. Harrison's revolution is one of faith, not the faith that the sea will be kind, but that the mind and the hand, working together, can overcome what the horizon hides. Now, with the sea's riddle solved, the clock leaves the workshop and climbs aboard the engines of industry. For on land, too, time is about to tighten its hold. The factory rises like a new kind of cathedral, its walls high and windowed, its chimneys exhaling into the grey morning sky. At its heart is not an altar, but a machine iron, steam, and endless motion. The people who come through its gates do not arrive at sunrise out of habit or the turning of the earth. They arrive when the clock says they must. In the world before, the rhythms of work are bound to the natural day. Farmers begin when the light spills over the fields. Artisans open their shutters when the streets grow bright. Even in towns, the bells of the church are the closest thing to a public timetable. There is flexibility, a quiet negotiation between task and daylight, between effort and the body's own needs. But the Industrial Revolution changes that negotiation into an ultimatum. The great mills and foundries do not sleep, their gears demand constant feeding. Coal must burn at a steady rate, steam must keep its pressure, looms must continue their clatter. And so the day is carved into strict segments, measured not by the angle of the sun, but by the unyielding hands of the clock. The whistle is the new rooster's crow. At dawn, its shrill call slices through rows of worker housing, pulling people from their beds. It does not wait for clouds to clear or frost to thaw. Men, women, and children rise at its command, dressing in the dim light, gulping tea or bread, and hurrying toward the gates before the second whistle. To be late is to lose pay, or to lose the job entirely. Inside, the factory is its own world. The noise is constant, a language of pistons, belts, and hammers. There is no room for the mind to wander. Every movement is tied to the machine's cycle. The clock on the wall does not need to be large. Everyone feels its presence in the repetition of motions, in the scheduled pauses for meals, in the long, aching stretches between breaks. In these hours, time becomes something bought and sold. A worker exchanges not just labor for wages, but minutes for coins, hours for survival. The employer owns the block of time between whistles, and within it, each tick is squeezed for output. Efficiency is measured in how much can be produced in the shortest span, and so the clock becomes a tool of discipline as much as of coordination. Before this, a craftsman might spend a day shaping a single item from start to finish, his pace guided by his own sense of care and skill. Now, that same task is broken into fragments, each assigned to a different pair of hands. The clock ensures that each fragment is completed quickly enough to keep the whole moving. The artistry of the work is no longer in the object, but in the timing. This new order of time reaches far beyond the factory walls. Streets begin to hum with synchronized movement. Workers flooding out at the end of the shift, shops opening to match industrial hours, schools ringing bells to train the next generation in punctuality. The clock's influence seeps into homes where family life bends to the demands of the shift schedule. Meals are eaten not when hunger strikes, but when the factory allows. Sleep is not a gentle drift, but a calculation how many hours remain before the whistle returns. It is not only the worker who adjusts to this new obedience. The factory owner, too, becomes a servant of the clock. Production schedules, shipping timetables, and market demands all conspire to make time a ledger to be balanced. Lost hours mean lost profit, and so the owners watch the clock with the same intensity as the labourers do, though for different reasons. There are, of course, resistances. In the early days, workers sometimes slow their pace, claiming machine trouble, stretching the moments between tasks. Strikes flare when hours are lengthened beyond endurance, or when the demand for speed pushes the body to breaking. Yet the clock is tireless. Even when idle, it ticks. A reminder that time is passing, that the day's quota is waiting to be met. Factories in Britain, in France, in America, all follow the same logic: standardize the work, standardize the hours, and the rest will fall into place. The spread of the railway, itself bound to precise timetables, reinforces the system. Goods, raw materials, and even workers move according to a shared national clock, linking towns to cities, mills to markets, in a network of measured time. For those inside the factory, the change is not just mechanical, but psychological. The sense of ownership over one's own day begins to erode. Even leisure is defined by the hours left over after work. A narrow band of freedom between shifts. The bell that signals the end of the day carries as much power as the one that began it, releasing the body, but leaving the mind aware that the next call will come soon. And yet, there is a strange solidarity in this shared schedule. Thousands wake, work, and rest in unison. The factory floor becomes a kind of community, bound not by geography or kinship, but by the common pulse of the machine and the clock. The faces change, but the rhythm stays, steady as the turning of the great iron flywheels overhead. In time, legislation will come, limits on working hours, requirements for breaks, bans on child labour, but these will not free workers from the clock. They will simply draw new lines on its face. For the machine has done more than create goods. It has remade society's relationship to time itself. It has taught people to see time as a commodity, to be traded, budgeted, and, above all, controlled. The world outside the factory begins to mimic this discipline. Offices, schools, and even households adopt the same segmented hours. Time, once fluid and seasonal, now flows in strict channels. The industrial day does not end at the mill gate. It seeps into the very way people think about their lives, their worth, their futures. In the dim light of early morning, before the whistle sounds, there are moments of stillness. Workers stand in the street, their breath fogging the air, their hands in their pockets, waiting. The sky is pale, the rooftops black against it, and for a brief while the old rhythm of dawn and human stirring seems to return. But then the whistle cuts through the air, and the spell breaks. The day is claimed once more by the master on the wall. The clock's rule is not temporary. It will travel with industry into new cities, new continents, and new centuries. It will be carried by the hum of electricity, the tapping of telegraphs, the schedules of trains and ships. The factory is only its first true home. The place where the clock learned not just to measure time, but to command it. Soon, those same trains that carry goods will demand a greater synchrony still, pulling entire nations into the same measured heartbeat. The railway's time. The whistle comes first, long, low, and tremulous in the distance. Then the faint metallic rhythm that swells as the train approaches. Iron wheels hammer the rails like a steady drum beat, a sound that seems to gather the day into itself. Townsfolk glance toward the station before the locomotive is even visible. They know what the sound means. Once, the time a train would arrive was a flexible thing, guessed by the sun's shadow or the bell in the church tower. Noon in one town could be 12 minutes later than noon in the next. The pace of life was local, each settlement tucked into its own pocket of time. But the railway changes that. Trains cannot run on shadows. They demand precision. The station clock becomes the new sun. Its face is white and unsleeping, the black hands slicing the air into measured fragments. The posted timetables, printed in neat columns and tacked to wooden boards, turn arrivals and departures into promises. 10:15 means 10:15 everywhere the train will pass, and woe to the one who arrives late. The change begins quietly. Station masters adjust their clocks to match the railway's time, which is drawn from a central observatory or telegraph office many miles away. Telegraph lines hum with these silent messages of minutes and seconds. The wires carry not just news or orders, but the very pulse of a nation, strung from town to town like a great invisible artery. For centuries, time had been intimate, a companion whose moods varied with the weather, whose pace matched the seasons. But now it becomes an iron discipline. The whistle does not wait for a fisherman's catch to be unloaded, or for a merchant to finish counting coins. It leaves when the schedule says it will, and the world must learn to keep pace. On the platforms, travellers stand with tickets in hand, eyes darting between the great round clock and the dark mouth of the tunnel or the curve of the tracks. The train arrives with a hiss and a shudder, its metal bulk shining with soot and rain. Porters lift luggage, couples embrace or part with hurried words, and then, as quickly as it came, the train gathers itself and moves on. It is not only passengers who are carried. Time itself rides the rails. At every stop, the station clock is checked and corrected if necessary, until the whole length of the line beats to the same rhythm. Noon in one city is noon in the next. The sun may disagree, but the railway does not care. In small towns, some grumble at the change. Farmers look at the long shadow stretching across their fields and shake their heads at the claim that it is now only 11. Old men still wind their pocket watches by the angle of the sun. muttering that this railway time belongs to the city folk. But even they cannot deny that the world feels different. The train, with its punctuality, makes distances seem smaller, days shorter, and the future somehow nearer. In the telegraph office, a clerk sits at his desk, tapping out signals that leap across miles in the blink of an eye. Each message is a tiny correction, an invisible hand nudging the seconds into place. It is a quiet revolution, one without banners or speeches. The new order slips into daily life almost unnoticed. Until one day, no one can remember a time when every clock told a different story. The railway timetable becomes scripture. Merchants plan their shipments to match the arrival of freight cars. Newspapers time their editions to coincide with the train that will carry them to the next city. Schoolchildren learn to read the clock not just as a skill, but as a survival tool. For missing the train might mean missing work or missing home. A strange thing happens as the timetable spreads. People begin to speak in exact minutes, as if time itself has become a map they can read. The 8:42 o'clock will get you there by 9:13 o'clock. Someone will say, and it is not guesswork but certainty. This is new in the long history of human life. For millennia, travel meant surrendering to uncertainty, to the whims of wind, road, and weather. Now, with steel rails and a shared clock, the world learns a new kind of trust. That time can be relied upon. And yet there is something else beneath this order, a faint unease. The old time, the sun time, had allowed for pauses, for delays that were simply part of the day's weaving. Now, missing a train is not a small inconvenience, but a violation of the schedule's authority. Time is no longer elastic. It can no longer be bent to fit a moment. It runs ahead, indifferent, pulling life along with it. The railways do more than standardize hours. They change the shape of the week. Markets swell on certain days when trains are due, towns bustle when a mail car arrives, and quiet themselves after it departs. In a sense, the nation now inhales and exhales in rhythm with the iron heartbeat of the railway. Consider the great stations of the cities, glass roofs arching high above the platforms, light pooling on polished rails and the constant hum of movement. In these places, clocks are not mere tools but symbols, mounted high like watchful eyes. They do not mark local time but railway time, the time of a whole country stitched together by steam and steel. By the late 19th century, standard time zones are born from this necessity. No longer will each town cling to its own minute. Instead, vast swaths of land will share the same clock face. This decision, reached in conference halls and written into law, is perhaps one of the most profound, quiet shifts in human history. Not because it changes what time is, but because it changes how we live within it. Somewhere along a rural track, a child stands by the fence, watching the train pass. The whistle sounds, the wheels roar, and the blur of faces in the windows is gone in seconds. The child does not know it, but that passing engine carries with it the heartbeat of the whole nation. A rhythm that will one day become as invisible and assumed as breathing. The trains keep running, The timetables keep printing, and one by one, the old sun clocks fade into memory. Time has been gathered up, tightened, and set on a single path. And though people still watch the sky and feel the slow turning of the earth, they now live in the age of the synchronized minute. An age born not in the heavens, but on the rails. And as the trains carve their hours into the land, the world begins to wonder, if time can be commanded to march in step, what else might be made to obey? The hill at Greenwich rises gently from the Thames, a green swell topped with brick and brass. Here, above the murmuring river and the slow sweep of English clouds, the Royal Observatory keeps its vigil. It is an unlikely throne for an empire, not of land but of time. The stone walls do not roar with the sound of battle. They hum with the patient turning of gears, the faint hiss of telescopes adjusting their gaze. The air is taut with precision. For centuries, navigators have needed a fixed point, a place where the dance between the earth and the sun could be measured without drift or doubt. The sea is a map of shifting horizons. Only the stars offer stability, and even they must be read against a clock. In 1884, at an international gathering in Washington, the decision is made. The prime meridian, the line from which all longitudes are counted, will run through Greenwich. There are other candidates, other meridians in Paris, Berlin, and Washington itself. But Britain's navy rules the seas, its merchant ships touch every port, and its maps already divide the world from this modest hill. The choice is less about astronomy than about empire, and so, without firing a shot, Greenwich claims the globe. From that moment, time radiates outward like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. Every ship's chronometer is set to Greenwich Mean Time before leaving port. Telegraph wires carry the signal down iron poles, across channels and deserts, into cities that have never seen England's shores. The meridian exists nowhere you can touch, yet it passes under the feet of miners in Chile, over the jungles of Borneo, and through the snowfields of Siberia. It is both nowhere and everywhere. The world begins to fold itself into this new rhythm. Noon is no longer simply when the sun stands highest in your sky. It is when Greenwich says it is. The heavens still wheel overhead, as they always have, but now they are measured through the lens of a single place. In fishing villages along the Mediterranean, church bells still toll their ancient hours, but railway stations insist on the time from England. The dissonance is felt in daily life. A farmer looks up at the sun and says it is midday. The station master consults his pocket watch and shakes his head. One speaks to the earth, the other to the empire. The telegraph makes this order possible. Where once information travelled at the speed of a horse, it now flashes down copper lines at the speed of lightning. A captain in Bombay can, in minutes, know the time in London. Schedules tighten, appointments span continents. Time begins to feel less like a local companion and more like a vast, invisible authority. Yet Greenwich Mean Time is not infallible. The Earth's rotation wobbles, slowing fractionally, nudged by the tides and the pull of the moon. Astronomers notice that the sky drifts from the clock's command. Still, to the human world, GMT holds its dominion. Trains arrive on it. Banks open by it. Wars begin and end according to it. There is a curious paradox in this rule of time. Greenwich does not so much control the hours as it erases their individuality. Noon in Cairo, noon in Cape Town, noon in Calcutta. All are declared the same moment, though the shadows they cast could not be more different. The sun may climb high in one place while sinking low in another, but on paper they are united. It is a triumph of unity and a quiet act of conquest. The observatory itself seems unchanged by the weight of its authority. Within its walls, astronomers in waistcoats and spectacles mark their careful observations, the click of boots on stone echoing in corridors lined with brass instruments. Outside, tourists come to stand astride the meridian line, 1 foot in the east, 1 in the west, smiling at the invisible geography beneath them. Few stop to think that, for much of human history, such a line did not exist. The world once knew 100 noons, each as valid as the other. Now there is one. Sailors, perhaps more than anyone, feel the meridian's power. Before its adoption, navigation was a guessing game played against the slow sweep of the sea. A few minutes' error in a ship's time could mean 100 miles off course. But with Greenwich as a constant, the seas grow smaller. A captain charts his position by the stars and compares it to the time at Greenwich. His east-west place on the globe revealed in the difference. Empires expand, trade quickens, maps tighten their accuracy. Still, there are murmurs of resistance. In Paris, pride bristles at the English claim, and for years French maps keep their own meridian. In rural outposts, villagers cling to their own rhythms, adjusting slowly, if at all, to the official hours. In truth, the conquest of time is not won overnight. It seeps unhurried into habits until the old ways are forgotten, and people no longer notice that they are living by a hill in London. By the early 20th century, the world has largely submitted. The meridian has become more than a line. It is a pulse that keeps ships, trains, businesses, and governments in step. When war comes, it will march in time with Greenwich. When peace returns, treaties will be signed to the same measure. Even the sun must yield, for human clocks now dictate when days begin and end. Yet standing in the shadow of the observatory, as evening falls over the Thames, it is possible to feel the fragility of it all. The meridian is an idea, no more solid than the wind. Its authority exists only because we believe in it, because we agree to bind ourselves to its invisible thread. The river flows on, as it did before the line was drawn, as it will when the line is forgotten. The stars wheel in their ancient courses, indifferent to our coordinates. Greenwich rules the world, but only as long as we let it. And yet, even as this invisible empire holds sway, a darker truth waits just beyond the horizon. That time, once unified, can be turned into a weapon. Dawn arrives, but no one greets it. On the front lines, the light is just another variable in the plan, another entry in the ledger of orders. Here, Time does not belong to the sun or the body. It belongs to the watch strapped to the wrist, the dial ticking inside the pocket, the synchronized heartbeat of thousands of soldiers. Somewhere far from the mud and the wire, a commander studies a map and points to a square of earth circling an hour in red. In that small decision, the fate of hundreds is sealed. War has always had its own rhythm. The long wait, the sudden charge, the lull that follows. But in the industrial age, that rhythm is not born of chance or terrain. It is carved into hours and minutes. A battle is no longer a storm breaking, it is a schedule unfolding. At precisely 0600, shells will fall. At precisely 1607, infantry will advance. At precisely 0613, the next wave will move forward. Time, once a background hum, is now a weapon as sharp as any bayonet. In the First World War, this mastery of seconds becomes absolute. Along the Western Front, miles of artillery are set to fire in unison, their fuses lit not by instinct, but by clockwork. Thousands of watches and field clocks are synchronized before dawn, ticking in quiet agreement as men crouch in the trenches, waiting for the second hand to fall. When it does, the world erupts. The ground shakes, the air becomes fire. The barrage is not random fury, it is calculated, measured to the fraction of a minute so that advancing troops walk behind a creeping barrage, a moving wall of explosions that protects them as they move forward. But the clock is indifferent to chaos. If the schedule slips, if the soldiers are too slow or too fast, the protective wall of shells will fall either ahead, leaving them exposed, or behind, striking their own men. To fight by the clock is to surrender to it completely, for even a heartbeat's hesitation can mean death. The telegraph and later the field telephone make this orchestration possible. Orders can be sent across miles of trenches in moments, all bound to the same ticking heart. Coordination stretches beyond sight or sound, beyond the reach of the human voice. A captain miles away can order a strike, and at the appointed second, guns he cannot see will answer. War becomes a matter of precision engineering. It is not only the land war that learns this lesson. At sea, fleets move like the hands of a clock themselves. Naval battles are fought on tight schedules, with ships turning and firing according to prearranged plans. On D-Day in 1944, thousands of ships and planes operate to a timetable so exact that each beach landing is measured in minutes. The sheer scale of such operations would be impossible without the tyranny and the reliability of synchronized time. In the skies, too, time rules. Bombers fly in formation toward their targets, each minute of their route calculated to intersect with other waves. Fighter escorts appear at the exact moment needed, for arriving too early means wasted fuel, and too late means disaster. For the soldier, this means living in a strange, double reality. The hours pass slowly in waiting. The drag of mud, the cold breath of wind, the hunger in the gut. And yet in action, the seconds flash past in blinding speed. Life and death can hinge on the interval between one tick and the next. Time becomes elastic, endless in the mind, merciless on the dial. It is not always soldiers who feel this tyranny most keenly. In the war rooms, staff officers bend over tables scattered with maps, charts, and watches. They know that every movement of troops, every shipment of supplies, every plane in the sky is bound to the plan they have written. The enemy, too, has their own clocks, and the battle becomes a contest of schedules, each side trying to disrupt the other's precision. A delayed train, a misread signal, a watch set wrong by even a minute can unravel months of preparation. In this new form of war, there is little room for the unexpected. The great generals of older centuries might have trusted to instinct, adjusting on the field. Now, the plan is drawn in ink and the clock enforces it. There is a certain cold comfort in this. The chaos of battle is given structure, the incomprehensible is made into something that can be calculated, measured, and, in theory, mastered. But the cost is that time itself becomes a killer. The clock also governs absence. In the silence between bombardments, soldiers count the minutes until the next scheduled strike. Prisoners mark the passing hours in their cells. Families far from the front measure their days by the timetable of telegram deliveries, a message of survival or loss, arriving at an hour already dreaded. Time becomes an unseen front line, advancing inexorably, no matter the will of those it sweeps along. And yet, for all its power, the clock cannot command the human heart. In stolen moments, men still find themselves watching the sky rather than the dial, gouging the hour by the length of a shadow, the slope of the light across the mud. In those moments, a trace of the old, natural time returns, as if the earth itself is whispering that it will outlast even the most synchronized war. But the lesson has been learned. In the wars to come, time will be an ally to some and an enemy to others. It will be planned for, stolen, raced against. Wars will be won or lost not only on courage or numbers, but on whether the right thing can be done at the right second. In this new age, the clock no longer merely records history, it writes it. And when the guns fall silent, the soldiers will carry time away with them, strapped to their wrists, leading us into the next chapter of its reign. The wristwatch is not born in the marketplace. It is born in the trenches. Before the Great War, timekeeping is a matter of elegance and occasion. Gentlemen carry pocket watches, suspended from chains, drawn out with a certain ceremony. Ladies sometimes wear small, jeweled timepieces on ribbons. Curiosities more than necessities. To most, a watch is a statement, not a tool. Its ticking is personal, almost private, hidden in the warmth of a waistcoat. But war changes this. In the press of the trenches, where seconds can mean life or death, the pocket watch is clumsy, its retrieval too slow. The soldier needs his hands free, his eyes able to catch the time in a heartbeat. So straps are fashioned, leather bands holding the watch face snug against the wrist. It is a simple adaptation, but a profound one. The watch is no longer something you carry, it is something you wear, as close to you as your own pulse. On the Western Front, wristwatches become as essential as rifles. Coordinated attacks require precise timing. In the deafening roar of artillery, voice commands vanish. The only signal that matters is the moment the second hand touches the mark. Soldiers huddle before dawn, synchronizing their watches by the officer's signal. At the appointed second, men rise together, moving through mud and wire in a grim choreography measured by gears and springs. It is not just convenience, it is survival. In the chaos of no man's land, a glance at the wrist can tell a soldier when the barrage will lift, when to advance, when to fall back. The wristwatch becomes a companion in fear. It's ticking a fragile reassurance that there is still order somewhere in the world. By the war's end, millions of men have worn them. They return home carrying more than memories. They bring habits. The wristwatch slips easily into civilian life. A man who once checked it to survive now checks it to catch a train, to meet a friend, to arrive punctually at work. The association lingers. The sense that the watch is a tool for readiness, a device that sharpens the edges of the day. The watchmakers, quick to see the shift, adapt. Before the war, many dismiss wristwatches as impractical and even effeminate. More a lady's ornament than a man's instrument. But the returning soldiers have rewritten that story. Advertisements now speak of ruggedness, precision, and reliability. Watch faces grow larger, straps stronger. What was once fashion becomes necessity. The wristwatch begins its quiet conquest. By the 1920s and 30s, the wristwatch is no longer merely a soldier's badge. It is a citizen's ally. Pilots wear them in open cockpits, timing their courses over unfamiliar landscapes. Drivers, in the new age of automobiles, glance at them before setting out on the road. Businessmen rely on them to keep meetings sharp. Workers use them to count down the minutes to quitting time. A world that has learned to live by the clock now carries it everywhere. The change is subtle but deep. In the era of the pocket watch, time was consulted, approached like a doorway you had to choose to open. You reached into your pocket, took it out, looked, and then put it away. Time was separate from you, like a document stored in a desk. But with the wristwatch, time is constant. You do not have to reach for it. It is already there, waiting, watching you as you watch it. The glance becomes unconscious. Time moves from being a visitor to being a roommate, always in the same room. And so the intimacy grows. The watch moves with the arm's every gesture. It feels the heat of the skin, the flex of the tendons, the thrum of the pulse. In a way, the wristwatch becomes the first wearable technology. A fusion of machine and body, so natural we forget it is there. Time is now not just around us, but upon us, strapped down as if we feared it might escape. Some embrace this closeness. For them, the watch is empowerment, a way to master the day, to make each moment count. For others, it is a leash, its face a reminder of obligations and limits. Either way, it is inescapable. The wristwatch's small circle of glass and metal contains both promise and restraint. By mid-century, the wristwatch has taken on new roles. In an age of exploration and competition, watches are built for depth and height. Diving watches that can withstand the weight of the ocean, Pilot watches with luminous hands for the darkness above the clouds. They are tools for adventurers, scientists, and workers alike, and their designs reflect the lives they accompany. And yet, for all its modern uses, the wristwatch carries a trace of its battlefield birth. Even in peacetime, its logic is military: be on time, be prepared, be coordinated. The discipline it enforces is quieter now, woven into daily life, but it is still there. There is a poetry to its spread. One soldier's trench, born necessity, becomes a factory worker's safeguard against being late. A student's countdown to the end of an exam, a lover's quick glance before a meeting. The watch, in its small, unassuming way, shapes human movement, holding our days in measured loops. By the second half of the 20th century, a wrist without a watch is rare. Children are given their first timepieces as rites of passage. Retirees receive gold watches to mark decades of service. The gift is symbolic. Here is time. In a form you can wear, a reminder of what you've spent and what you have left. The revolution is complete. Time is no longer a thing that stands apart, marked on towers or carried in pockets. It is something we fasten to ourselves, something we take into the bath, the field, the boardroom, the dance floor. The wristwatch is both an heirloom and a tool, a piece of jewelry and a piece of machinery. Above all, it is a companion, one that never sleeps, never tires, never looks away. And yet, even as the watch secures its place, the seeds of change are already being sown. New ways of measuring and recording time will appear, ways that are colder and more impersonal, ways that watch us as much as we watch them. The intimacy of the wrist will give way to something more distant and perhaps more demanding. From the soldier's wrist to the worker's hand, time has found its way onto our very skin. But soon, it will move beyond the body into machines that do not just tell time. They record it every moment without pause. The dawn bell rings, but it is no longer the church tower that calls men and women from their sleep. It is the whistle of the factory, a sharper summons, echoing through soot, thick air, and beyond the gates. Waiting with mechanical patience is the new arbiter of the day, the punch clock. It stands like a sentinel at the threshold, humming faintly in the early light. Its face is not that of a man, nor even of a watch, but a machine with a narrow mouth that accepts cardboard slips. You approach it not as you would a timepiece, but as you might approach a ledger in which your worth will be measured. Your hand slides the card in, and with a heavy, clean click, the machine bites down. The hole it leaves is small, almost nothing at all, a simple round absence. Yet within that absence is proof that you were here, proof that you obeyed the hour set not by the sun or by the season, but by the factory's command. And tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, more holes will come, until your working life is a constellation of perforations. The punch card was not born in the factory. Its ancestor lay in the quiet realm of invention. The mind of Herman Hollerith, a man who saw in holes a language. Hollerith's cards were first made to speak to machines in the service of government. In the census of 1890, they counted people as if they were rows in a ledger, their traits, age, birthplace, occupation, recorded not in ink but in absence. A machine read the patterns with the precision of a clock, faster than any human hand could tally. It was a miracle of speed and order, a promise that the world could be made legible. But promises, once proven, often find new masters. By the early 20th century, the language of the punch card left the census halls and marched into the factory floor. Here, the cards no longer counted lives abstractly. They measured them by the minute. You were no longer only a worker, you were an entry in a daily ledger, a row in a vast book of hours. The shift was subtle, but it was absolute. In the old workshops, a foreman might keep an eye on arrivals and departures, his gaze sometimes softened by familiarity. Now, there was no softening. The punch clock had no memory of kindness, no capacity for forgetting a lateness. It recorded without pause, without judgment, without forgiveness. Its memory was perfect, and its memory was permanent. Factories embraced this perfection. Owners could now prove not only that their workers had been present, but that every delay, every early departure was quantified. Timekeeping ceased to be about coordination. It became surveillance, a silent audit, day after day. Workers felt the shift too. The morning walk to the gates now carried a quiet tension. You might be a minute late. The streets crowded, the train delayed, and that minute would be carved into your record like a flaw in stone. The clock's mouth would bite down just the same, but its teeth would be set in a different column, a different place, telling a different story. And if too many of these stray marks appeared, you might find the gates closed to you entirely. The language of the punch card was simple, but it spoke with finality. A hole in one column meant you arrived on time. In another, you were late. In some factories, the card was punched not once but 4 times a day. Arrival, start of lunch, end of lunch, departure. Every gap between those holes could be studied, compared, calculated. Efficiency could now be graphed. Human rhythms could be measured, and in being measured, could be altered. Not all resented it. Some found comfort in its fairness. No foreman could claim you were absent if the card said otherwise. In disputes over pay, the card was an ally, a witness. It was the kind of witness who never forgot, who spoke in clean, round proof. But even allies can be stern. The punch card had no room for excuses, no patience for context. It did not care if the streets were flooded, if your child was ill, if you had stopped to help a stranger. Its holes told a story without nuance, and in the telling, they remade the way life itself was valued. Beyond the factory, the punch card began to seep into other parts of life. In offices, clerks punched in and out. In government buildings, hours were tallied. Even schools in some places experimented with timing students' arrivals, recording their punctuality in the same mechanical hand. A culture was forming in which the first proof of your worth was your obedience to the clock. The machines themselves evolved. Early models required a separate card for each day later. The same card carried weeks of data, its neat rows filling up like the ruled lines of a diary. But this diary was not yours. It belonged to the company, the institution. It was your life, but not your possession. Some cards bore names, others carried only numbers. A number was efficient, unambiguous, interchangeable. It was easier to sort, to file, to replace. And so, gradually, the human being behind the number could fade from view even as their hours remained perfectly visible. The punch card was a strange kind of mirror. It reflected not your face, but the shape of your days, and as the decades passed, its perforations began to resemble not only the measure of work, but the measure of control. In time, the card would leave the factory again, finding its way into the early computers of the mid-20th century. Once more, it would speak to machines in the language of holes. But now, the machines would not merely count or record. They would calculate, decide, even store memories. The punch card would become both the ancestor of the data age and the quiet artifact of an industrial past. Yet for millions, the card was never about technology. It was about standing at the gate, sliding the card into the slot, hearing the click. It was about knowing that your day had begun not when you rose from bed, but when the machine said it began. It was about walking away a day's end with another hole in the card, another mark in the ledger, another day documented and closed. Even now, in museums of industry, you can find them. Drawers full of old punch cards, their corners softened by handling, their holes precise and unyielding. If you pick one up, it feels light, almost fragile. And yet, for the person whose hours it once recorded, it might have been heavy as stone. A card like this could open the door to a livelihood or close it forever. Time has since moved on. Factories still measure hours, but the paper has given way to plastic badges, biometric scans, digital logs. Yet the idea is the same: proof of presence, proof of obedience. The holes are gone, but the logic of the punch card remains. We like to believe that time belongs to us, that it is ours to shape, but the age of the punch card reminds us of how easily it can be claimed by others, how neatly it can be filed away. It shows us that the tools we build to measure can also become the tools that bind. And as we leave this chapter of history, we carry its imprint. The faint sound of a card sliding in, the sharp click of the punch, and the unblinking truth that the machine remembers everything. It begins in stillness. Not the stillness of a monastery before dawn, nor the heavy hush of a clockmaker's workshop at midnight, but the sterile stillness of a modern laboratory. White floors, pale walls, air thick with filtered silence. In this place, time no longer ticks or chimes, it vibrates. Somewhere in the machinery, invisible and unceasing, atoms are trembling at a rate so precise that the stars themselves, the very patterns humanity once trusted to guide caravans and ships, seem almost careless by comparison. For thousands of years, the sky was the ultimate clock. Priests, navigators, and farmers alike looked upward to read the hours in the movement of constellations. The heavens were immutable, perfect, divine, and yet here, in the glow of fluorescent light, A cesium atom oscillates 9,192,631,770 times per second. And that, not the sun, not the moon, is what we now call a second. The cosmos has been dethroned, not by arrogance, but by curiosity carried to its logical end. The journey to this room begins long before electricity hums through its wires. In the mid-20th century, physicists sought to escape the imprecision of Earth's rotation. The planet's spin wobbles slightly, slowed and tugged by the moon, stirred by ocean tides, even altered by the shifting of molten rock beneath our feet. The day is not always exactly 86,400 seconds long. Sometimes it is longer, sometimes shorter. The sun, our oldest timekeeper, is not perfectly reliable. So scientists turn to something smaller, purer, immune to weather, war, and wind, the atom. In 1949, at the US National Bureau of Standards, the first atomic clock was born. Its heart not made of gears or pendulums, but of ammonia molecules. Less than a decade later, cesium took its place as the standard, and in 1967, the definition of a second was rewritten. Not as a fraction of Earth's day, but as those exact oscillations of cesium's frequency. Time was no longer bound to the sky, it was bound to the nature of matter itself. In the hum of the atomic clock, there is a paradox. Its precision is absolute, yet its purpose is to keep a world. Messy, human, unpredictable, in sync. The heartbeat of cesium keeps GPS satellites aligned so airplanes land exactly where they should. It allows the internet to transmit without collapsing into chaos. It coordinates stock trades, scientific experiments, and the sending of spacecraft beyond the reach of the sun's familiar pull. Without these clocks, the modern world would not just slow, it would unravel. But this precision does something subtler too. It changes how we imagine time itself. Once, a second was long enough to notice the swing of a pendulum, the drip of water in a clepsydra. Now, a second is vast compared to the fragments we can measure. Scientists speak not just of milliseconds, but microseconds, nanoseconds, picoseconds. Scales at which the human body cannot leave or think, yet which shape the infrastructure that carries our lives. There is an intimacy to this knowledge, a strange closeness to the very fabric of existence. The cesium atom, or the more advanced strontium lattice clocks of today, do not merely keep time. They are time, embodied in the consistent, eternal dance of subatomic particles. The universe is not so much observed as heard, like an endless note vibrating in the dark. And yet, the deeper humanity peers into this precision, the more we find that time is not entirely obedient. Relativity, whispered by Einstein decades before these clocks existed, tells us that time itself bends and stretches with speed and gravity. Two identical atomic clocks, placed at different altitudes, will tick at slightly different rates. A clock on a mountaintop runs infinitesimally faster than one at sea level, not because of a flaw in the machine, but because time itself flows differently there. This knowledge is not academic, it is navigational. GPS satellites orbiting high above Earth must account for both the slowing, caused by their speed, and the speeding, caused by their weaker pull of gravity. Without constant adjustment, your phone's map would lead you kilometers astray within hours. The same technology that begins in quiet rooms of glass and steel reaches into our pockets, our cars, our planes, guiding us through the world without our ever noticing the cosmic choreography that makes it possible. There is beauty in this hidden dependence. It is the modern version of sailors reading the stars. Except the stars now are the oscillations of atoms, too small to see yet constant enough to cross oceans of air and light. We move through our days as if by instinct, but beneath it all is the unwavering rhythm of these clocks, keeping the invisible threads of civilization taut. The scientists who tend these clocks speak of them almost with reverence. They are calibrated in rooms where temperature, pressure, and even the faint tremors of footsteps are controlled. Light is filtered, magnetic fields dampened, vibrations silenced. The goal is purity, not moral, but physical, so that nothing disturbs the atom's song. In this pursuit, the lab becomes a kind of chapel. The measurements a kind of prayer, though the deity is not one of myth, but of matter itself. And yet, for all its grandeur, the atomic clock is humble in appearance. No golden face or swinging pendulum. Often it is a box, unassuming, humming softly. The most precise timekeepers ever built by human hands hide their beauty inside, much as the most meaningful truths in history often hide in the smallest, least assuming corners. This quiet revolution has consequences for how we think of ourselves. In the past, time was local. Noon in one village might be minutes different from noon in the next. The great railway and telegraph ages collapsed those differences, but atomic time collapses them entirely. Now, the world beats to a single pulse, agreed upon to within billionths of a second. In this, humanity has created not just a tool, but a shared heartbeat, a collective synchronization on a scale once reserved for dreams or myths. Still, there is a cost. To live in such exactness is to risk forgetting the imprecision that once shaped us. The old rhythms, the sun's uneven arc, the sway of seasons, the human tolerance for arrival, round a certain time, fade into inconvenience. We are trained to expect perfection, to be impatient with its absence. The hum of cesium has made our tolerance for uncertainty almost as obsolete as the sundial, and perhaps that is the quiet irony. We can measure time to the tiniest fraction imaginable, yet we cannot hold on to it. The most perfect clock still ticks toward endings, still counts down moments that slip from our grasp as surely as they did in the age of shadows and water clocks. Precision cannot slow loss. It can only describe it more exactly. Somewhere in the heart of a mountain, deep in vaults where atomic clocks keep the world aligned, there is a kind of stillness that feels older than science, a sense that no matter how deeply we divide the second, we will always be dividing something infinite. Time remains both a tool and a mystery, a constant we can count, but never fully comprehend. And as we step out of the laboratory and into the world, the noise returns. Cars rushing, voices calling, bells and buzzers marking the hour. Yet beneath it all, the hum continues, as steady as the turning of the earth once seemed. We walk faster now, leave sharper now, because somewhere, in some sealed room, time is being kept with more care than we keep most things we love. Beyond the glass walls of the laboratory, the world waits for the next division, the next vibration. Soon, time will not only be kept, it will be shared in an instant across the globe, each clock breathing in perfect unison. And so we step quietly toward the next age, where seconds will no longer be merely measured, but woven through invisible threads that bind us all. It begins with a hum, not the hum of gears, nor the whisper of pendulums, but a quiet electrical murmur, the sound of an entire evening being summoned into a single room. A warm glow pools in the dark, and there, in the center of the home, a television screen blooms into life. For a few seconds, the picture trembles, sharpens, and settles, and with it, so does the household. It is 7 o'clock, precisely. The world outside the front door might be unpredictable. Trains delayed, clouds gathering, seasons shifting, but inside the moment is fixed. The newsreader's voice begins at the exact same minute. His tie perfectly knotted, his tone measured like a metronome. The second hand in the kitchen confirms it. The show has begun, and so the evening's tempo is set. This is the new clock. The tower bells of centuries past marked time for villages. Now, broadcast schedules mark time for nations. The broadcast is not an open stream, it is a timetable as rigid as a railway's. 6:30 is the cartoon, 7 is the news, 8 brings the drama, 9 the variety show, and in between, the commercials arrive with their own small tyranny, breaking the flow, demanding attention. The night is carved into segments, each with its own mood, its own rhythm, its own measure of minutes. Before television, the home's evening was an elastic thing. Supper might run long. Conversation might spill into candlelight, and stories were told at whatever pace they found. But television contracts the night into fixed shapes. You do not start the show when you are ready. You are ready when the show starts. Families hurry to wash dishes before the program begins. Children count the minutes until the next cartoon. Adults glance at the clock and know they must sit down now or miss the first act. It is a quiet but profound shift. In the early years of broadcasting, schedules were modest, a few hours each evening, sometimes with long gaps of static or interludes of a test pattern. But as technology improved, and as advertisers discovered the potency of mass attention, those hours filled. Soon, the day was bracketed not just by sunrise and sunset, but by the morning sign on and the late night sign off, with every hour between claimed by something to watch. The magic of it is not only in the content, but in the simultaneity. Millions watch the same thing at the same time. The laughter track in a sitcom is not merely a cue to chuckle. It is a reminder that somewhere, countless other living rooms are laughing too. A political address, a breaking news bulletin, a moon landing. These moments are not just reported, they are shared in real time, uniting strangers in an invisible audience. This shared timing shapes culture itself. Phrases from television scripts enter casual conversation. A character's catchphrase is repeated in offices and classrooms the very next morning. Major events become fixed in memory, not just for what they were, but for when they aired. Where were you when? Becomes a way of mapping history. But there is another clock hidden inside the screen. The commercial break. It is the unspoken ruler of television's time. Every storyline, every match, every performance bends itself to these intervals. The tension of a drama is held just long enough to carry viewers through a message from a sponsor. Even live events like sports or award shows insert pauses so advertisements can flow. Time, once a natural current, now has engineered rapids designed to pull the viewer forward. The irony is that while television disciplines the evening into exact minutes, it also has the power to dissolve time entirely. Sit down for a single program and suddenly 3 hours have passed. The steady drip of episode into episode can feel like a trance. The viewer emerges blinking into the night, unsure how the hours vanished, the way one might lose time staring into a fire. The living room itself changes around this new hearth. Chairs and sofas turn toward the screen. Conversations adapt to commercial breaks. Mealtimes shift to accommodate favorite programs. Even the architecture of homes subtly responds. Larger rooms, central walls cleared to give the set prominence, electrical sockets positioned to support its place of honor. Where once the clock was mounted above the mantelpiece, the television now claims that role, commanding both sight and schedule. The presence of this shared clock is not limited to entertainment. In moments of crisis, television gathers people in an urgency that no bell could summon. In 1963, when the news broke of President Kennedy's assassination, Americans turned to their televisions, and the days that followed unfolded not just in grief, but in synchronized viewing. In 1969, when Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon, millions watched the same grainy image at the same instant, as if time itself had paused to let humanity hold its breath together. Even in smaller, everyday moments, television shapes the collective day. The evening news teaches the public to think of the day's events as something to be reviewed in a single sitting, packaged between the weather and the sports scores. Morning shows encourage a particular kind of beginning, bright, brisk, full of chatter. Late-night programs signal a winding down, a slow release into sleep. But not everyone welcomes this new tempo. Some resist the pull, choosing to keep evenings free for books, walks, or conversation. Others bristle at the intrusion of commercial schedules into domestic life. Critics warn that the clock in the living room is not neutral. It dictates not only when we watch, but what we think about, when we discuss it, and how long we dwell on it before the next broadcast pushes it aside. Still, the pull is strong. There is comfort in knowing that at 8 o'clock tonight, a certain voice will greet you, a certain music will play, a certain familiar scene will unfold. In an unpredictable world, television offers small islands of certainty, predictable down to the minute. And then there are the live broadcasts, where time feels electric. A championship game, a royal wedding, a breaking news event. These are not simply watched, they are experienced in step with millions. The collective heartbeat is almost tangible. When the final whistle blows or the ceremony ends, the moment is sealed in memory as if the whole world had been in the same room. Television's time is not forever. Already, new technologies creep in, promising freedom from the tyranny of schedules. Videotapes, DVRs, streaming services. But in the era when television rules without rival, its clock is absolute. The hum in the corner is the evening's metronome, and every member of the household moves to its beat. For better or worse, the clock has entered the living room, not as a face and hands, but as light and sound. It measures the evening in stories, in laughter, in the pauses where commercials live. It gives a nation not just the same time, but the same moments, the same frames, the same memories. Beyond the screen, another kind of clock waits. One without commercials, one without faces, one that speaks not to households but to machines. Soon, time will no longer be something we watch together, but something that hums invisibly through the wires, synchronizing the world without ever showing its face. There is a certain magic to the airplane window at cruising altitude. The world below stretches vast and quiet, clouds drifting like continents, the land a silent map of rivers, cities, and roads. Time up here feels unmoored. The sun might rise twice in one day, or vanish before you finish your coffee. Somewhere behind you is the hour you left. Somewhere ahead is the hour you're flying into. Between them is this suspended state where minutes and miles are the same thing. For most of human history, distance and time moved together. To cross a continent took weeks. To cross an ocean, months. The body had time to adjust, to move with the slow rhythm of ships or the steady pace of caravans. Time was something you entered gradually, like walking into the sea. But the airplane collapses this old rhythm. In the span of a few hours, you can leave a winter dawn and arrive in a summer afternoon. It is a wonder, and it is disorienting. The invention of time zones was itself a kind of surrender. A recognition that the sun could no longer be the sole master of the hour. In the 19th century, when railways first stitched together vast territories, local noon became an obstacle. In every town, clocks were set to the sun's highest point, so that noon in one village might be 10 minutes different from noon in the next. This worked when travel was slow, but trains, running on timetables, needed something uniform. In 1884, at the International Meridian Conference in Washington, D.C., the world agreed to divide itself into 24 slices, each one an hour apart, all anchored to a prime meridian at Greenwich. It was a triumph of coordination and a quiet loss of something older. Local time, with its gentle irregularities, gave way to a grid. We traded a patchwork quilt of hours for a machine made pattern, precise, and unyielding. For decades, these zones held steady. A traveller by train or ship would cross them in sequence, the body having time to adjust to each change. But then came the airplane. In the 1950s, with the rise of commercial jet travel, the human body met a new kind of shock. jet lag. It was not simply tiredness, but a rift between the clock inside and the clock outside. The body still lived in yesterday, while the world demanded it be in today. The science of it is simple. Our bodies keep their own time, a circadian rhythm tuned to the cycle of light and dark. This rhythm regulates not just sleep, but hunger, mood, and alertness. When we cross time zones too quickly, the rhythm lags behind, confused by the sudden shift in daylight. We wake in the middle of the night, or feel an irresistible drowsiness at noon. Our appetite arrives at the wrong hours, our minds drift in a fog, and yet we adapt, slowly, unevenly, but we adapt. The body learns the new schedule, and after a few days, the inner clock aligns again with the outer one. Still, for that brief time in between, we live in two times at once. The phone in our pocket shows the local hour, but our bones remember another. Air travel forces a kind of double vision. You can leave Paris in the morning and reach New York before the clock there has caught up to your departure. You can fly westward, chasing the sun, and watch an afternoon stretch into something like eternity, or fly eastward into the night and find the dawn waiting at your arrival gate. It is not just that the clock struggles to keep up with our speed. It is that we are now fast enough to bend its meaning. In some ways, this shrinking of the world makes it feel more connected. A businesswoman in Tokyo can attend a meeting in Los Angeles the same day. A family can visit relatives on another continent without losing months to travel. News, ideas, and friendships cross oceans in hours, carried not only by data cables, but by human presence. The old barriers of distance dissolve, and with them, the slow pacing of time that once kept each place distinct. But there is a cost to living without borders in time. Our bodies are ancient creatures, evolved for the patient rhythms of sunrise and sunset. The constant crossing of zones leaves us untethered. The internal clock reset again and again like a watch wound too tightly. Some travelers develop elaborate rituals to soften the blow, adjusting their sleep schedule days in advance, wearing sunglasses to trick the brain into believing it's night, fasting and feasting to coax the metabolism into a new tempo. And still, time remains stubborn. Even without travel, modern life often puts us in more than one time zone at once. A worker in London answers emails from Singapore in their own midnight. A friend in New York texts from the future. Tomorrow already begun for them. One-line meetings collapse the boundaries between day and night until the mind forgets which hours belong to which place. Time zones exist on maps, but in our daily lives, they blur into something more fluid. We carry these multiple times within us. Part of the mind might still live in the hour of departure, another in the hour of arrival, another in the time zone of someone we love far away. The result is a kind of temporal layering, moments stacked rather than lined in a neat sequence. The clock in the kitchen may say one thing, but the heart remembers another. In airports, this layering becomes visible. Travelers nap under bright lights, eat breakfast at midnight, sip coffee in the middle of the night, because their bodies insist it is morning. Departure boards show a dozen cities, each with its own hour, each connected by a flight that can leap between them faster than the body can follow. Here, the map of the world is not divided by borders or oceans, but by hours. The airplane is not the only culprit in bending time. Telecommunications, satellites, and the internet have done their own work in dissolving the old borders. Yet the plane remains the most visceral reminder that we live in an age where time can be crossed like a river, swiftly and without ceremony. It is a power so natural to us now that we forget it is new. That just a century ago, no one could wake in one hemisphere and sleep in another without the slow passage of weeks. Perhaps this is why the disorientation of travel carries its own strange beauty. For a few days, we live in that gap between times, neither wholly in one place nor another. We see the world from a step outside its normal pace. And in that small distance, we notice things. The slant of light at an unfamiliar hour, the way a city sounds when our bodies believe it is midnight, the quiet streets before the locals wake. In this way, time zones without borders are not just a challenge, they are an invitation. They remind us that time, though measured and divided, is still something we experience in the body first and on the clock second. That no matter how fast we move, we carry our own sun and moon within us. Soon, the clock will shed even this tether to geography. Time will no longer belong to the place where we stand, but to the network that hums invisibly through the air, aligning every device on Earth to the same unseen beat. The borders will vanish entirely, and time will become one. The shift begins quietly, almost without ceremony. For centuries, time has been marked by circles and hands, by the slow, measured sweep across ivory or enamel, the tick, the tock, the gentle pulse of gears hidden beneath the surface. All of it has been a language the world has learned to read without thinking. But now, in the late decades of the 20th century, that language begins to change. There is no chime to announce it, no bell ringing in a tower. Instead, there is a faint, almost invisible light, 4 glowing digits, unblinking, exact, appearing on the face of a machine. They are steady, sharp, unsoftened by motion. The digital display does not need to move to tell the story of time. It is always now, precise to the second, sometimes to the fraction of a second. The hours no longer sweep into being. They arrive fully formed, whole, undeniable. The minutes click forward without drama. The seconds are counted in relentless rhythm. Where once the mind would glance at a round clock face and interpret the time, understanding not just the hour, but how far it had advanced. Now the numbers speak directly. There is nothing to translate. Time becomes an absolute statement. 12:07 a.m., 3:40, 5 p.m., 19:12 p.m. It is the late 1960s when the first practical digital clocks emerge, but the idea has been whispered in laboratories long before. Early prototypes are crude, glowing tubes called nixies, with numerals shaped from bent wires lit by orange plasma. They seem almost quaint now, their light flickering faintly, still hinting at the warmth of older technologies. But soon, LEDs and LCDs arrive, colder in tone, more efficient, more enduring. By the 1970s, the digital wristwatch becomes the emblem of a new kind of timekeeping. No ticking hands, no winding crown. Just a sleek rectangle on the wrist, numbers appearing at the press of a button. The first of these are expensive, novelties for the curious and the wealthy, but within a decade, they are everywhere. Children wear them to school. Athletes use them to time their sprints. Engineers wear them in the glow of control rooms. Time, once tethered to the walls of homes and offices, now moves with the body. It rides in pockets and clings to wrists. It travels in cars and airplanes, embedded in dashboards and cockpit panels. It perches at the corner of television screens, silently marking the present even as moving pictures carry viewers into fictional worlds. Something else begins to happen. As the digital display becomes smaller, cheaper, and easier to embed, it spreads into places where no clock face had ever gone before. Kitchen microwaves, washing machines, stereo systems, all of them sprout glowing numerals. Time seeps into appliances, making them precise and programmable. The oven can be set to turn off at exactly 18:30. The coffee machine can begin brewing at precisely 6:45. The hum of gears, once the heartbeat of a clock, is gone. In its place, quartz crystals vibrate invisibly, their oscillations counted by circuits. These vibrations are steady beyond human perception, measured in millions of beats per second, producing a consistency that even the finest mechanical watchmakers of old could only dream of. Yet there is something impersonal about it. The old clock face was a landscape, a miniature world with its own horizon and motion. You could feel the passage of time in the leaning of the hands, in the distance between the minute and hour marks. You could see the future approaching and the past falling away. The digital display erases that horizon. It offers only the pinpoint of the present, each second replacing the last in perfect, bloodless succession. It is like reading a sentence one word at a time without seeing the page. Precise, yes, but stripped of the poetry of movement. Still, for a world accelerating into computers, satellites, and networks, precision is not just a luxury, it is a necessity. The digital clock speaks the same exact language in Tokyo and Toronto, in the belly of a submarine or the orbit of a spacecraft. It can synchronize to the thousandth of a second, coordinating systems that stretch across continents. The 1980s bring an even deeper integration. Computers, once rare, begin to appear on desks, in offices, and in homes. Each one carries a clock within its circuits, not just for the user's convenience, but for the machine's own operations. The digital display on the screen becomes the quiet witness to the dawn of the personal computing age. Meanwhile, in train stations and airports, the old flipboards with their clattering letters give way to silent, glowing panels. Departures and arrivals are now displayed with the same clarity as the time itself. Everything coordinated, updated, immediate. But with this clarity comes a subtle shift in psychology. In the analog age, the mind allowed for approximation. A little after 3, nearly 10 o'clock, The digital display permits no such softness. It is either 14:01 or 14:02. You are on time or you are late. There is no in between. This exactness begins to shape behavior. Schedules tighten. Deadlines sharpen. A meeting at 0900 now means 9 o'clock exactly, not a loose gathering that begins when all are present. Even leisure bends to the precision. Television programs begin and end on the dot. Computer games record the duration of play. Gym treadmills count every passing second. By the late 20th century, the digital display has become so ordinary that it is almost invisible. People no longer marvel at the idea of knowing the exact time. It is simply expected. A glowing wrist, a phone screen, a corner of a monitor. The present moment is always just a glance away. And then, in the early years of the 21st century, the digital display begins to retreat from the foreground. Not because it has lost importance, but because it has moved deeper into the fabric of life. The time is now embedded in devices that do 1,000 other things. A smartphone shows the hour, yes, but also the date, the weather, the messages from friends. The watch on the wrist not only tells time, but measures heart rate, maps routes, answers calls. The glowing digits are still there, but they are one thread in a vast weave of information. The clock has lost its face, and in some places, even its dedicated presence. And yet, the authority of time has not weakened. If anything, it has grown stronger. In this age of digital networks, time is the spine that holds everything together. The internet runs on synchronized clocks. Banks transfer funds in fractions of a second. Satellites navigate by signals that demand unimaginable precision. The digital display may be just one small window, but behind it is a vast machinery of order. It is a quiet irony. As the clock face has faded from daily life, time itself has become more inescapable. In a world where every device knows the hour, lateness is less easily excused. In a world where every system depends on perfect synchronization, even a single second can matter. And still, the numbers glow. In the darkness of a bedroom alarm clock, on the corner of a phone screen, on the quiet surface of a laptop, no gears turn, no pendulum swings, just the steady pulse of a crystal, the silent shift from one number to the next, each one erasing the last. Somewhere, a person wakes in the night, glances at those glowing digits and feels the quiet weight of the hour. 2:17, not a moment before, not a moment after. A certainty that is both comforting and, perhaps, a little unnerving. Time no longer leans forward or drags behind. It arrives in perfect increments, each one demanding attention before disappearing forever. The hum of gears is gone. The face is gone. Only the truth remains, cold, bright, and absolute. And yet, beyond the glowing numbers, a new era waits. One where time itself will slip from the wrist and the wall, dissolving into invisible currents, no longer merely displayed, but woven into the air we breathe. The air hums, though we cannot hear it. It is not the hum of bees in summer, nor the drone of distant machinery, but the quieter, deeper hum of time itself, stretched across the planet like a single thread of light. Somewhere, a packet of data travels through a buried cable under an ocean, carrying with it the heartbeat of a clock in Colorado or London or Tokyo. It is not bound for one place, but for all places. Time, in this age, no longer drips from the teeth of iron gears or sways in the slow pendulum of brass weights. It travels in pulses of code, binary, weightless, and nearly instant. The network time protocol, born quietly in the early years of the internet, has done something remarkable. It has made almost every clock on Earth agree. It is a strange kind of magic. The monks of medieval Europe could only dream of this kind of unity. Their bells ringing out to villages that answered, if they heard them, with their own local chimes. The railway engineers of the 19th century had to fight for the adoption of standard time zones, dragging reluctant towns into a new age of synchrony. Now, no one protests when a clock on the other side of the planet sets the rhythm for our own. It happens so quietly that we do not notice. In a way, the work began long before the internet. The first telegraphs in the 1840s began sending time signals down copper wires so that railway stations might agree when a train would arrive or depart. Astronomers used these wires to share star readings, synchronizing their measurements across great distances. The need was simple but profound. If two people are to agree on anything in the physical world, they must first agree on when they are speaking about it. Without that shared frame, the world frays into disconnected moments. The network time protocol, NTP, as the engineers call it, is the modern heir to this lineage. It is the quiet diplomat of the digital age, negotiating between atomic clocks and smartphones, satellites and server farms, wristwatches and wind turbines. It speaks in fractions of seconds, settling disputes too small for human senses, but vital for the machines we rely on. Imagine standing in the center of a great city at midnight. Around you, 1,000,000 devices. Some in pockets, some in offices, some embedded in traffic lights, security cameras, and hospital monitors. All quietly adjust themselves, imperceptibly, so that their sense of now matches every other. This is not the chiming of a single grand clock in a public square. This is 1,000,000 whispers, all saying now at exactly the same moment. The origin of NTP lies in the work of a man named David L. Mills, a computer scientist who in 1985 set out to solve a problem. How could computers scattered across the globe keep their clocks in agreement when data could take unpredictable paths and speeds to travel between them? The answer was both mathematical and poetic. By measuring the time it takes for a signal to travel between 2 points, and sending that signal more than once. A computer can estimate the actual current time, even if there are delays along the way. It is as if two friends on opposite sides of a canyon shout to each other, listening not only to the words, but to the echo, the lag, the air in between. At first, NTP served a small community, scientists, engineers, government agencies. But as the internet seeped into every corner of life, it became the unseen foundation of our days. Banking systems rely on precise timestamps to track transactions down to the millisecond. Stock markets depend on synchronized clocks so that trades can be verified. Power grids, which must shift loads between regions without error, depend on the same precision. Without NTP, our world of instant messages, live broadcasts, and online navigation would dissolve into chaos. Even art and music, human expressions that seem beyond the reach of engineering, now leave on NTP's steady pulse when a musician plays a live concert streamed to millions. The servers handling that video feed align their time so that each viewer hears the same note at the same moment. When friends watch a film together from different countries, their screens remain in harmony, frame by frame. We do not thank NTP for this. We simply accept the seamlessness as natural, forgetting that for most of history, the idea of sharing a moment with someone far away was only a dream. There is a paradox here. In making our clocks so perfectly aligned, NTP has erased the charming irregularities of local time. Once, noon was whenever the sun stood highest over your own horizon. In the early days of the railways, passengers could look out the window and see station clocks that disagreed by a few minutes, each one still loyal to its own sky. Now, the sun's slow arc means less to our sense of no than the pulse of an atomic clock deep underground or high above in orbit. And yet there is comfort in this order. A farmer in rural Kenya can join a video call with a doctor in Norway, and their voices meet as if across a small table. A spacecraft leaving the Earth can be tracked with such precision that commands are timed to the microsecond. Even as it speeds past the moon, our shared no allows a vast, scattered humanity to move as one organism. There is another layer still, one that feels almost spiritual in its reach. Every NTP server traces its authority back to a handful of stratum zero sources, the most accurate timekeepers in existence. These are atomic clocks, tuned to the vibrations of atoms, drifting only by a second every millions of years. From these, the time filters downward, each stratum correcting the next until it reaches your phone, your laptop, your kitchen smart speaker. In this way, the heartbeat of the entire planet originates from a small, select group of silent, humming machines. We live inside their rhythm. We do not choose it. And like the monks who once woke by the bell, we find ourselves shaped by it. Our meetings, our messages, our meals all quietly adjusted by pulses we never hear. There is no ceremony to it, no tolling from a bell tower to remind us that the moment has shifted. There is only the seamless, constant certainty that our no is the same no as everyone else's. Perhaps the most remarkable thing is how invisible it all remains. The world does not thank its timekeepers until they fail. On the rare occasion when NTP servers falter or go out of sync, the effects ripple instantly. Credit cards are declined, airline check-ins freeze, news broadcasts misalign, and in some cases, even emergency services stumble. The machine of the modern world depends on this quiet alignment more than most of us will ever know. In this way, the network time protocol is not just a tool, it is the latest chapter in humanity's long, complicated relationship with time, where once the sun, the moon, and the seasons gave us their uneven, human scale hours, Now a digital pulse shapes our days. We have brought time to heal so tightly that even the smallest fraction of a second is under our control. And yet, in gaining this mastery, we have surrendered a piece of our independence. For the clock, now, is everywhere, not just on our walls or in our pockets, but woven into the invisible currents that carry our voices, our maps, our work, and our play. Even in sleep, the signals pass through us, updating the devices that wait by our bedsides. We have entered an age where time no longer needs to be seen to be obeyed. It is tempting to believe that such perfect unity brings us closer together. And in some ways it does. But in other ways, it deepens the quiet tyranny that began with the first mechanical clock. When every second is shared, every delay is visible. The expectation of immediacy grows sharper, less forgiving. There is no excuse now for being a few minutes late. In the realm of NTP, everyone has the same clock, and the clock is always right. In the silence between these pulses, perhaps, we can still hear the ghost of older times. The uneven, human times that once gave us the freedom to wander between moments without fear of losing the world's rhythm. But those ghosts grow faint. The network time protocol does not dream, does not pause, does not forget. And so we move in perfect step, our every heartbeat measured, our every moment aligned, until even our sleep belongs to the clock. Yet in this constant vigilance, another kind of time begins to stir, the restless, glowing urgency of the notification. There was a time when the day could end. Shadows lengthened, lamps were lit, and the world's concerns slowed to the rhythm of firelight. Messages, if they came at all, waited for morning. A knock at the door, a letter at the gate. Time could be paused, its threads set down until one was ready to pick them up again. Now the pause has vanished. The door is always open, the gate always unlatched. The world does not wait outside. It follows you into the bedroom, curls into the palm of your hand, and taps your shoulder in the darkness. A screen blinks. A vibration shivers across the nightstand. The clock has found its voice, and it speaks through the tyranny of the notification. Each sound has its own character. A calendar reminder is crisp, polite, insistent, it's time. A message ping is lighter, more urgent now, this moment. The alert of breaking news strikes harder, its tone carrying the weight of something that demands you stop whatever you are doing. We live among a choir of invisible bells, ringing not from towers, but from pockets and wrists, from kitchen counters and glowing dashboards. This is not the first age to live under constant summons. Medieval towns were once bound to the sound of the church bell, tolling not only the hours but warnings of fire, calls to worship and signals of danger. Factories in the 19th century whistled their shifts into being, carving the day into slices of labor and rest. The difference is that their bells fell silent. Ours do not. The notification is not bound to the sun's rise or the moon's setting. It leaves outside of natural time, a creature of the instant. It does not respect the human body's need for rhythm. It demands attention on its own schedule, or rather, on no schedule at all. A text can arrive at midnight, a work email at dawn, a headline before you've taken your first breath of the morning air. The result is a strange erosion of boundaries. The hours of work bleed into the hours of rest. The hours of solitude dissolve into the hours of conversation. Once, the journey home from the marketplace or the office marked a return to private life. Now, the marketplace travels with you. The office rests in your pocket. The chatter of 1,000 voices hums in your ear long after you've sought silence. It is not only the frequency of these intrusions that changes us, it is the expectation they carry. Every alert is an invitation, but also an obligation. To ignore a message feels impolite. To delay a reply feels negligent. And so the second the notification appears, it pulls on an invisible thread that runs through your mind until you answer it. We are no longer keeping time. Time, in the form of these small demands, is keeping us. This quiet captivity is reinforced by design. The engineers of the platforms and devices have learned to shape their notifications with the psychology of reward. The bright red badge, the gentle buzz, the flashing icon. Each is a lure for our attention, a small promise of novelty, connection, or urgency. The moment we respond, we confirm the system's success. And like all systems of reward, it teaches us to seek the next one sooner and sooner still. Consider the difference from the world that came before. In the early 20th century, a letter took days or weeks to arrive, and the reply took just as long. A single exchange of thoughts could stretch across a season. In the 21st, a single conversation can contain 100 interruptions in an hour, each marked by the arrival of a notification. The thread of thought splintered into fragments. The ancient philosophers spoke of the virtue of kairos, the right moment, the opportune time, as distinct from chronos, the measured ticking of the clock. Notifications collapse these two into one. Every moment becomes both measured and urgent, both counted and claimed. There is no distinction between what is essential and what is trivial. They arrive in the same tone, with the same bright insistence. The consequence is a constant readiness, a posture of anticipation that never fully relaxes. Even in the minutes between alerts, the mind waits for the next one, its stillness disturbed by the possibility of interruption. Sleep itself becomes lighter, fragmented by the occasional glow of the screen or the vibration against the mattress. We are carried through the night on a tide of digital tides, our dreams marked by the faint echoes of the waking world. Some try to resist. They silence their devices, leave them in drawers, turn off their notifications entirely. For a time, it works. The quiet is a relief. The boundaries restored. But soon the pull of connection, the fear of missing something, the itch to check, draws the hand back to the phone. The very act of muting the world becomes a kind of vigilance. Has anything happened while I've been away? There are moments, though, when the spell breaks. Standing on a mountain ridge, far from signal, or sitting at a dinner table where the phone is left behind, one feels the old spaciousness return. Time regains its breadth. The hour expands to hold the conversation, the silence, the unhurried glance. These moments are rare, but they are reminders. The body remembers the older rhythm, the one in which the bell did not ring unless there was reason. The tyranny of the notification is not absolute. It thrives on habit, and habits can be broken. But the deeper truth is that it is not only the devices that summon us. It is ourselves. We have built a world in which every thought, every image, every event can be shared instantly, and we do not wish to be left out of its current. The notification is both master and mirror. It shows us the pace we have chosen, and in choosing it, we surrender to it. It is tempting to imagine that we are living in the most urgent age in history, that the speed of our communication is unprecedented. But perhaps the real change is subtler. We have lost the natural pauses that once framed urgency. Without those pauses, the heart does not slow, and without the slowing, the present moment becomes a blur, a constant rush of now that leaves little room for reflection. In this way, the notification is not merely a tool of timekeeping, it is a reshaper of time itself. It fractures the flow of our days into 1,000 tiny interruptions, each one demanding to be addressed before the next arrives. The seconds between them grow shorter, the hours more crowded. Time becomes a series of points rather than a line, and in chasing each point, we risk losing sight of the whole. And yet, there is still the possibility of choice. Just as the monks once rang the bell to call themselves to prayer, we might choose what bells we allow into our lives. We might let some messages wait until morning, allow some alerts to pass unheard, reclaim an hour in which the world cannot find us. In doing so, we might remember that not every sound is a summons, and not every moment must be marked. The tyranny of the notification will not end soon. But in the spaces where it falls silent, in the rare stillness of a quiet room, in the slow breath before answering, in the decision to leave a message unopened, there is a faint rebellion. The clock may have followed us into our sleep, but it does not yet own our dreams. And yet, even in dreams, the ticking remains, a shadow of the machine we once built to serve us. It waits for us in the waking hours, patient and unblinking, until at last some of us try to step away entirely to find out if time itself can be escaped. They go quietly, most of them. No farewell parties, no announcements in the village square. Some vanish like the last ember in a hearth, slipping away before dawn, leaving only an unmade bed and a cup still drying on the windowsill. Others take a final slow walk through familiar streets, touching the bricks, smelling the baker's air, memorizing the rhythm of their own footfalls. They are not running from people. They are running from something less visible, more patient. Time. The first to leave are often the ones who hear its footsteps loudest. An old sailor who swears that clocks tick louder than waves. A schoolteacher who wakes one morning with the sudden conviction that her life has been divided into lessons and bells, and she can no longer bear the tyranny of intervals. They leave for the forests, where the canopy muffles the days and nights into a single green breathing. In the beginning, the forest seems to keep no schedule. Rain comes when it comes. The wind arrives without appointment. Sunlight drips through the leaves like an unmeasured hourglass. The escapees lie under the trees, watching shadows change shape, imagining that the clock has no foothold here. But they find it still, in the heartbeat that will not slow to match the sway of branches, in the stomach that growls at regular intervals, in the inner knowledge of when dusk should be arriving. Time hides in the body. Others go further, to deserts. They say the desert swallows minutes whole. You can walk for what feels like a single breath and find the sun has shifted halfway across the sky, or sit in silence for what feels like a day and find the shadows barely moved. Here, the wind smooths footprints almost as soon as they are made, and distance deceives the eyes. The escape feels complete until the stars rise and the constellations remind them of old sailors counting days at sea, of farmers marking seasons for harvest. Even the desert is a vast clock face, its hands measured in shadows and starlight. The most desperate of them sail to islands beyond the reach of signal towers. They destroy their watches, refuse to look at the sun's position, measure nothing. The first weeks feel intoxicating. No alarms, no calendars, only the sound of waves and the rise and fall of tides. But tides themselves are clocks, pulled by the moon's invisible hand. Fish return at certain hours. Birds cry at familiar points in the day. Even here, rhythm is unavoidable. Some do not travel at all. They retreat inward instead, closing their eyes in dim rooms or gardens, attempting to dissolve the boundary between one moment and the next. Meditation, they call it. Breathing, they call it. They try to sit still until minutes dissolve, until the mind forgets to measure, but the breath counts itself unbidden. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. The body's own metronome is loyal to time, no matter how far the mind wanders. An old woman once told me she escaped time by watching the moon instead of the clock. The moon is gentler, she said. It doesn't hurry you. She measured her days by the way its light moved through her window, waxing and waning, never impatient. And yet, she still knew when the month had turned, when the seasons had changed, when another year had gone. The moon, too, was keeping its own appointment. There is something humbling in this discovery, that no matter how far one travels, the pulse follows. No matter how far one hides, the seasons arrive. The fugitives of time learn that their exile is never complete. Time is not only in the machines we built to mark it. It is in the rotation of the earth, in the pull of gravity, in the chemistry of the brain. It is stitched into the architecture of existence. Some return to the cities, wiser but quieter. They no longer glance at the hour every few minutes. They move more slowly, speak more softly, as if they have accepted a pact with the shadow that walks beside them. Others remain in their chosen wilderness, not because they have escaped time, but because they have made peace with its slower faces. And then there are those who never stop trying. They drift between forests and deserts, between islands and mountains, chasing a perfect stillness they will never quite find. They are pilgrims of the unmeasured moment, carrying within them the faint hope that somewhere, somehow, there is a place where the clock has no hands. I once met one of them, a man who had spent 2 decades without a watch. He told me he could feel the hour in the air, the texture of sunlight, the weight of shadows, the song of birds. It was, he admitted, simply another clock, only one without numbers. You can't escape time, he said with a smile, but you can choose which of its faces you'd like to look at. Perhaps that is the truth of all these attempts. Not escape, but choice. To step away from the regimented tick of seconds and into the wider, older rhythms that have been here long before we learned to divide the day into hours. To hear time not as a march, but as a tide, still in the quiet hours before sleep. Even the most determined hear it. The slow echo of passing. It hums in the blood, it whispers in the dark. It reminds us that every heartbeat is a step forward on a road from which no one turns back. The fugitives lie awake under their roofs of leaves or stars or thatch, and they know they have outrun the clock, perhaps, but not time itself. And so they learn, in forests, in deserts, on islands without names, that the clock may be left behind, but time travels within them. The room is quiet except for the slow breath of the night. Somewhere far off, a clock ticks. Faint, steady, like a pulse muffled by distance. You might almost forget it is there. But you know it is, because time has a way of pressing itself into our awareness, even when we wish it gone. We have reached the end of this long journey through the story of how we learned to measure time, the story of how we built machines to master it, the story of how, in the process, we became servants to those machines. It began, as all stories do, in the raw light of uncertainty. Before clocks, before bells, before sundials carved shadows across stone, we lived by the language of the world itself. The slow unfurling of a leaf, the way the sun lingered on the horizon before it fell, the songs of birds at dawn. Our lives expanded and contracted with seasons, not schedules. We worked until the day grew dark. We rested when our bodies told us to. We gathered not at a specific hour, but when the tide, the weather, and our own readiness converged. When mechanical time arrived, it came like a promise that we could escape the whims of the clouds and the seasons, that we could have certainty, that we could know with precision when to meet, when to work, when to pray. In monasteries, bells told to order the day of the devout. In cities, clocks mounted on towers told a new truth to merchants and labourers alike. Time could be divided, counted, shared, and oh, how we embraced it. The invention of the clock was not merely a tool. It was an act of reshaping reality. Minutes, once only the mathematician's abstraction, became part of ordinary life. The heartbeat of a pendulum began to dictate the rhythms of trade, of conversation, of love itself. No longer did we have a while before an event. We had exactly 20 minutes. No longer did we leave when the sun dipped. We left at 5 o'clock sharp, but in freeing ourselves from nature's uncertainty, we stepped into a cage we did not yet see. At first, It was a gentle cage, one that promised opportunity. Time could be organized, optimized. We could do more with it. And yet, as centuries passed, the machine's quiet authority grew harder to resist. The factory whistle replaced the rooster's crow. The commuter train replaced the meandering walk. The digital clock replaced the tower bell. Somewhere in that transformation, something shifted deep within us. Time was no longer the field in which we moved freely. It became the ruler before which we were called to stand. Always accounting for ourselves, always proving we had used our share well. And so here we are, in an age where we have more ways to measure time than ever before, but fewer ways to feel free from it. Consider the phone in your pocket. At any moment, it can tell you the precise time in Tokyo, in Cairo, in New York, down to the second. It can remind you that you are late, or that you must be ready, or that your minutes are slipping away. The old monastery bell rang for all who could hear it. The clock in your hand rings for you alone, and it follows you everywhere. And yet, there is a quiet truth hidden in this. The machine does not actually care. The clock does not command us. It simply ticks. The orders come from within, from the part of us that has learned to bow to its rhythm. We are the ones who have woven the tick into our thoughts, who feel guilt when we are wasting time, who push ourselves to fill every moment with use. What, then, would it mean to make time obsolete? Some imagine a return to the world before clocks, to villages that followed the curve of the sun, to lives lived in the deep, slow tide of the seasons. But the truth is, even there, time still pressed on. The sun still fell. The body still aged. The children still grew. Perhaps what we truly seek is not the destruction of clocks, but the softening of our allegiance to them. I think of the sailors who once navigated by the stars. For them, time was not a tyrant but a companion, a way to orient themselves in the great, dark unknown. The sky's rotation was a map, not a whip. Their time was marked not by how much work they could squeeze into an hour, but by how many degrees the constellations had moved since they last looked up. Or I think of the artisans in the early cities, who shaped clay not to meet a deadline, but to match the moment when the kiln was hot enough, when the glaze was ready, when the air was dry. Time was not separate from the craft. It was part of the craft. The work and the moment matured together. We still carry the capacity for such time within us. We can choose to let moments breathe. We can decide that the worth of an hour is not in how much we do with it, but in how fully we inhabit it. Imagine, for a moment, a world in which you did not check the clock today. You rise when your body asks you to. You eat when hunger calls, not when the schedule says it is lunchtime. You walk until your legs tell you they are satisfied. You speak with someone not until your next thing begins, but until the conversation has found its natural rest. The day becomes elastic again, not bound to the rigid increments we have learned to obey. There is, of course, a danger in this. The world as we have built it depends on coordination. A train cannot wait for every passenger's own sense of readiness. A surgeon cannot arrive whenever it feels right. The clock has its place, but so too does timelessness. And maybe, just maybe, the art of living well is knowing when to stand inside the frame of the hour and when to step outside it. In the end, the machine did not make time obsolete. It made our relationship to time sharper, clearer, and, in some ways, harsher. But it also gave us the opportunity to see time as something we could shape, not just something that happened to us. The tragedy and the triumph are the same. We are now the keepers of time as much as it is the keeper of us. We cannot escape the tick entirely. It is too much a part of our minds now. But we can let it be background instead of master. We can let the clock keep its steady pulse while we follow another. The pulse of breath, of seasons, of heartbeats, of rain on the window. Maybe making time obsolete is not about silencing the machine, but about remembering that it was never truly the source of time in the first place. The night outside is deeper now. The clock still ticks in the distance, but softer, as if it too has grown tired. Somewhere in the darkness, a new day waits, not in hours or minutes, but in light and shadow, in warmth and cold, in the countless changes that need no measurement to be real. And perhaps that is the way forward, to live in such a way that time becomes the quiet backdrop to life, not its constant judge. To step into each moment as if it were the only one, not because time is gone, but because, in that instant, it does not matter. The clock may keep ticking in the dark, but we need not march to every beat. Sometimes, the truest way to master time is simply to forget we are keeping it. And so, the story rests here for tonight. The candle we lit at the beginning burns low now, its light falling gently across the quiet shapes of the past. We have walked together through centuries, through shadows and chimes, through the strange and tender ways humanity has tried to hold time in its hands. And though the gears have turned, though the hours have passed, the heart beneath it all beats as it always has, slow, human, and eternal. What we have shared tonight is more than history. It is a thread spun long before us that still weaves through our days. The clock may measure the passing of hours, but it cannot measure the meaning we give them. That we carry ourselves, and in that carrying, something ancient continues to hum, soft and steady, in the quiet. Thank you for being here in this small stillness between the past and the present. Thank you for giving this time to reflection, for letting these old stories breathe again in the warmth of your listening. You are not just hearing history, you are keeping it alive. Now, let the day loosen its hold. Let your thoughts drift like leaves on a slow, moving river. There is no more to do tonight. May your dreams carry you gently as the ticking fades and the night opens like a deep, endless sky. This has been the Sleeping Hourglass, where the past tucks you in. If this brought you peace, you are always welcome to return. And now the candle dims, the room grows still, and somewhere, beyond the reach of clocks, you are already halfway to dreaming.